What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Zulu Cast Episode 1. I am your host, Alan, and I am here with my co-host, Creek,
Hi, everybody.
Kitten,
Hi guys.
Max,
Yo, what's up?
and Shay.
What up, though?
Today, we are going to be doing our deep dive on INFPs. Before we start the podcast, I guess we could tell you guys what our types are. I am an ENTP. Creek, you are.
I'm an INFP.
Kitten, you are.
I'm an INTJ.
Max, you are.
I'm an INFP.
Shane, you are.
I'm an ENFP.
Okay. And before we start the podcast and before we start, talking to you guys about what an INFP actually is, I wanted to ask Creek and Max as INFPs. When you guys found out that you were INFPs, did you ever doubt for a second that you were INFP, or did it always make sense to you? At what point did you know that you were an INFP?
Go ahead, Max.
When I read the description, I was like, yeah, that kind of sounds like me. But then I started like kind of confusing whether or not I was an introvert or an extrovert. So there was a time where I thought I might be an ENFP, but I've taken the test so many times to the point, and on every like different website you can, I know I'm an INFP at this point.
Yeah,
Creek?
pretty much the same for me because I took the test and I got INFP and I kind of resonated with the description. But after like looking into the functions, I thought I might be like an ENTP or an INTP because I felt like I was more logical than INFPs. Just in the sense that I wasn't as emotional as other INFPs, so I thought I might be an INTP or an ENTP. But after further reflection, I probably am an INFP, just because of the fact that I use FI a lot more than I use like TI. So yeah, it's like probably my conclusion.
Are you guys happy as INFPs? Like, hypothetically, if you could change your personality type, would you remain an INFP?
Oh, 100%. I would never change my personality type.
Same for you,
Yeah,
Creek?
I mean, I don't know if I could definitely see the negatives like to being an INFP, but I don't ever think I would change it because like the parts of myself like that I like have a lot to do with the fact that I am an INFP and they kind of arise from me being an INFP. So yeah, probably not.
Yeah, I don't think I would change mine either. Like, yeah, there are some negatives, but at the same time, like, there are a lot of positives of being an INFP. Like, I definitely think it's worth it.
And I'll just say, as an ENTP, INFPs are my favorite personality type, without a doubt. There are many, many lows, and we're going to jump into that here soon. I personally adore INFPs. I would posit the question to Shane and Kitten. I know that they're not as informed about MBTI as me or Creek, for example. But you guys being on the outside, what is your perception of INFPs?
I mean, with Max and Creek as like, I guess, examples of like an INFP, I think I'm learning a lot more, I guess, but I don't know. They've given like a lot of good insights just having conversation with them. I don't dislike INFPs. I think for me in particular, they probably combat like my personality type in some ways. So I think there's a bit of what's the word? Can someone help me with the word for like
Polarity?
no, yeah, conflict. Yeah, there's like some conflict between our personality types, but like on the whole, like yeah, I don't hate INFPs.
I mean, I think like between like us four, there's like we all like use FI like right. So I think like we have that in common. So I think like that's like something I can like resonate with like Shane and Honey on and like
Yeah.
especially Max because we both use like FI as like our primary function. So I'd say like that's one thing like that connects us all like in a way because like we all would like value like
Yeah.
individuality and stuff. So
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think my thing with it is being an ENFP. I feel like there's a high sense of relating, when it comes to like creativity and open mindedness and stuff. Um, I think the difference, of course, being the extroversion, introversion, and to the extent that those may be, Uh, but at the same time, most INFPs I come in contact with, I feel like I don't have a problem seeing. Like, I don't want to call it the extrovert side because I feel like we perceive extroversion as like wanting to go out with friends and stuff, but it's more just like recharging with people. I feel like the majority of INFPs I come across, I would question their introvert function, because I would be like, you seem very at least when it comes to Creek and Max, they
No, they're like opposites, right?
What do
Like
you
in
mean?
terms of their extroversion. Like, I mean, I would picture Max to be more of like an extrovert, and that's
Really?
what I
I would
thought.
I've
definitely,
never
yeah.
gotten the vibe that like
Just like I think,
It's the
just
way
in,
we've
like
always
I think,
communicated, though.
yeah. Like, you just seem more of an extrovert to me in some of the conversations I see.
However, though,
Interesting.
I have met certain INFPs that I feel like are very, very grounded in that sense of introversion, and are heavy FI users. So I feel like those are the more obvious people. But Creek and Max, I don't think necessarily fall into that category. But it just shows, the differences. Although you have the same personality type, your function
I
may not
think
be the same.
Yeah, I think we're like outliers. So, because I mean, especially me, like I'm kind of introverted, but like compared to other INFPs, because people say like INFPs, it's like between INFPs or INTPs, as to like which type is like the most introverted type. And I am like, if it's like on a spectrum, like I would say most INFPs are like really introverted. Like the most INFPs I've met, at least, seem to be like super concerned with like how they feel about things and like what's going on in their lives, and like they're super like self-absorbed and kind of spend most of their time alone. So I think like me, Max, and Mia, who's another INFP, are like kind of like outliers in terms of like we're a little bit more like extroverted and like more interested in like meeting other people and like I don't know, starting conversations that aren't like inherently like about us, or like don't doesn't concern like us as people. So
I would say, though, to some extent, there's a. I feel like this is just NFPs, though, where we like, to some extent, are. I don't know if it's a sense of selfishness, but we're passionate about certain topics. So I think, like, with you and me, Creek, we've been able to discuss a lot of really cool things. I don't want to call it selfish, but to extent they're things that solely interest us, and we know we can have
yeah.
a cool discussion because they do. But at some extent, it's like we're talking about things that we care about. Like, it's like, oh, I want to talk about this, so I know I can go to Creek to talk about it. And it's like that's kind of the self versus like, and that's not to denounce the open mindedness that comes with being an INFP or ENFP. It's just to say, uh there is some sense. I don't want to call it self-absorption because I think it's different for you and me, but maybe that's just me just trying to alienate myself and not wanting to seem self-absorbed.
Well, yeah, it's funny because people will be like INFPs or like ENFPs or like like mainly INFPs are self-absorbed. They'll say that, and I'll be like, wait, that's not true because I'm okay with talking about other types. I'm okay with like conversating like about other types of people, like or like people who don't agree with me and stuff. But I've noticed like what I do is just like I'm just really good at like finding something I can relate with within somebody
It
else.
has,
So
yeah,
it
I'm
would
the same way.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it would still be about me. I'm just
Sense of
like really good at
self-absorption.
finding like how I can find a way where I'm like, yeah, like we agree on this, and then kind of like
Finesse
make
your
it
way
about
around it
me.
to a common
Yeah,
grounding. Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
INFPs are kind of self-absorbed, like a little bit, and like you wouldn't think that because like in the description it kind of like makes INFPs out to be like empathetic and all that, and I do think INFPs are super empathetic, but only recently have I like started to realize how kind of unintentionally INFPs are kind of self-absorbed, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, and that makes way for a good transition. Let's talk about what INFPs are. INFP stands for introverted, intuitive, feeling, and perceiving. But the problem is a lot of people get into MBTI and they look at that as the overlap and they say, well, sometimes I'm introverted, sometimes I am emotional, sometimes I'm lazy, and sometimes I'm not. So how could I be put into this box of being an INFP? And that's a misunderstanding of what it means to be an INFP. An INFP is not a box, is more so a direction. So when somebody says you are an INFP, it doesn't mean you are like this. It kind of means that you have a propensity to maybe be like this, but it doesn't even mean that. It means as an INFP, you filter the world through this way and you're conscious. And this way is the cognitive function stack. And that's what we're going to explain here. We're going to explain the four main functions that INFPs use as I explain them. If any of you want to interrupt me, you can go ahead and posit any input you have. And after every function, I'll wait a little so we can discuss. So the first function of an INFP is called introverted feeling. So introverted feeling can be described as a valuing of one's own belief and the process of identifying what that value is. So for INFPs, they're constantly saying, how do I feel about this? They're checking in with their environment to make sure that how they feel inwards is congruent with their environment. And you can think of FE, which is the opposite of FI, as harmony with groups. And you could think of FI as harmony with the self. So INFPs are constantly trying to be in harmony with themselves. And coincidentally, this is why you'll constantly hear INFPs be like, I'm just not feeling like myself, or I just don't know who I am, or I just don't know what I want to do. Or in conversation, INFPs will say, I feel like this. I think this. They're less likely, not to say that they won't do it, but they're less likely to say the group does this. They're less likely to say a blatant fact, because that would actually be more aligned with their last function, which is introverted thinking. They will more so say, I feel this about this. So introverted
Wait,
feeling.
isn't our last function TE or is it TI? I thought it was TE.
Your 4 function is TE and your 8 function is TI.
Okay.
So in your main
Right.
function stack, it would be TE, but overall.
So
it'd be
like
TI.
those are like the shadow functions, like, and then TI would be like the absolute last function that we use.
Mhm.
Okay, makes sense.
So FI, the main way that INFPs maneuver themselves in the world is simply to say, how do I feel about this? Creek and Max, do you feel this to be aligned with who you are?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Yeah. What do you think, Creek?
Yeah, I just think like because like I mean even when people talk about like I'm more than one personality type, and they'll talk about how they're like a mixture between 2 or a mixture between 3 or whatever. I think that just comes from the fact that when people like I think it's just a lack of like not focusing on the functions, because I like sometimes have a hard time deciding whether I use FI more than I use NE, because if I use NE more, some days I use NE more, and then I could be an ENFP on that day. But I feel like that's a misunderstanding, because I feel like MBTI should be like looked at as like an archetypal
Exactly.
thing, like that works over time, like it's your character. It's not like how you feel like on any specific day, right?
Yeah.
So
And
don't
I feel like a lot of INFPs have a hard time accepting that, because like they have this whole like I don't want to be put in a box thing, and
Right.
but it's just an overall generalization of a personality type. It doesn't mean you're not gonna like exhibit any other qualities of a different personality type. It's just like you said, just a general archetype. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like an aura. It's like a pattern that you like when people say like I took the test today and then I got this, and then I took it a year later. Now I'm a
Yeah.
different person. So like I've developed. I don't get that whole thing, because like
I don't know how people
like
be getting
I don't
different like results every time
yeah
they take it. I've never once got a
yeah I've
different one, but
literally like I've literally got INFP every time I've taken it, and I think if you're getting like different results every time you take it, I mean, for one, like the test is like super flawed, and second, it's like a lot of times when people take the test, like they take it based upon how they feel at that very moment, as opposed to like kind of taking an objective look at as to who they are. So like if it asked them like the first question, I think like on the MBTI, or like on the first page at least, is like, are you like in a social situation, like do you like spend time around your friends, or like do you spend like would you go around and meet new people, like on a certain day you might be feeling like super like low on energy, you might be like, no, I'll just like spend time around my friends. I mean the way you answer the questions, right? So like I feel like you should answer like the questions on the test if you want a more accurate result, based upon like how, like, just take an analysis, like an objective look at your character like throughout your life, as opposed to just answering how you feel in the moment, because like I feel like that's what a lot of people do, and then they get like confused as to who they are when they're like answering like impulsively in the moment. So that would be my critique, but yeah.
no, exactly. And I had a friend, he was like, yeah, but you could just get a different result just depending on how you feel like that day or like a time period. But like I said, I don't think people really, they don't really understand that it's like like overall generally, not how you feel in the moment, but like you gotta like view in the macro, like how you are, um, like all the time, not just in the moment. So
What I
I think
find funny
definitely.
about this is I feel like there's going to be an INFP listening to this podcast. They're going to be like, well, I don't think I'm an INFP because I don't feel like that, and they don't recognize that they're using FI in that moment. Like they're literally telling themselves like, well, I don't relate with this. I don't feel like this. And this does transition to one of the questions I had for you guys, and we kind of touched upon this earlier, but do you guys consider INFPs to be selfish and or self-absorbed? And Kitten and Shane, you can give your input on this as well as outside sources.
I wouldn't say self-absorbed or selfish, but I would say kind of more self-absorbed. But I don't think it comes in like a malicious way. Like personally speaking, like when I try to relate to other people's like problems or whatever, I try to like think of a time where I kind of felt like that, which you could say that is a little self-absorbed. But I don't think there's like any like malicious intent behind that. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't either. I think it goes with some of the character arcs. I guess I don't know how to word it, but like of empathy. It's very sometimes it's difficult to feel empathetic when you don't relate. Not necessarily. I guess I mean more sympathetic. It's hard to feel sympathetic when you don't relate. Not that INFPs necessarily give off some sense of sympathy always, but I mean that to say like you look for that grounding. And so I would say to some extent self-absorbed, but I would agree with Max. It's not in a malicious way, and I wouldn't even argue it's in an unhealthy way. I think it can be taken to that extreme, and there are definitely people who have, but just
Yeah,
I was
I
just saying
think
like search within self is not always like to find and understand
right.
it's not bad.
I think when we talk about INFPs being self-absorbed, we're like mainly talking about FI, right? And like I don't want to be like I don't want to stereotype types because I mean this is just like my like because I don't want this to come off as like
Do
me
it.
like
Don't be scared.
shitting on okay like INTJ because I would say like FI based on his position can be like a negative thing, right? And I think. And I'm like I'm not saying INTJs suck, but like I feel like INTJs use FI in a more malicious way than INFPs do because they have it as their third function, so they'll process like they'll have like their beliefs about how the world should be, like how things just are, because they have TE as their first function, right? And then they'll funnel it through FI, and then just be like, this is how the world should be, and then just like reject everybody's like. And okay, not all INTJs do this, but like I've like definitely like noticed like a propensity for like INTJs to like have like a self obsession about them being right about how the world is and how people should act and what is good and bad, and then they have all these opinions, and they kind of just like reject everybody who disagrees with them. And this is like a trend I've kind of picked up like in the INTJs that I've met, and I think this is just like where the FI is in the function stack, like how FI is used. So just bringing it back to INFPs, I'd say INFPs like the way they use FI is like to kind of just like self-heal and just understand themselves. So I don't think it's in a malicious way, even though it is self-absorbed. So that'd be my take on it.
You guys think that INFPs are self-absorbed to a degree, but it doesn't come from malintent.
Yeah. That's what that would be like, yeah.
I feel like
My
that's
thing with it though is FI is also the process through which INFPs identify their values. And having those values like doesn't necessarily create a problem within itself for other people. I think that FI creates problems for INFPs. Like the INFPs that hold FI within themselves, it brings them a lot of chaos within their own inner world. And I say this because socially, I'll notice that INFPs will see like one thing that they don't resonate with in somebody, and it totally warps their perception of them to where there may be other characteristics about the person that may say make them redeemable, or just that like if the INFPs seen those characteristics, they would enjoy those characteristics about that person, and it may change the mind of the INFP and have them say like, I thought about this person wrong. But I feel as if INFPs, they have this thing where if they feel that something is wrong with you, it may completely cut them from ever giving you a chance again, and it may make them turn cold. And I feel like this is it's bad for other people because INFPs could cut them out of their lives, but it's also bad it's also bad for INFPs if they don't become aware of this, because it could just leave the INFPs in isolation because they become hyper idealistic. And I've seen INFPs who just like they dislike so much in people that they don't even fucking talk to other people because they see something they don't like and then they can't even stand the person anymore. And I think it's hard for INFPs to know this, to know that this happens to them, and to know that these like kind of modes take control of them. because INFPs are idealistic and emotional. So they're likely to create stories around why they're not like around why they're being antisocial essentially, and say like, well, I'm being antisocial because these people aren't moral, but they're really just being antisocial, and is producing a negative result for their health and the benefit of those around them, and them producing relationships.
Yeah, I actually like have like an anecdote like that relates to what you were just talking about because like me and my friend were like taking an Uber back home the other day or the other night, and our Uber driver was like he was just like trying to make conversation, so he was just telling us about his night or whatever. And at first he was just telling us about how he has this like rich guy friend and how he like buys some strippers like whenever he comes out, and then we were just kind of like okay bro,
It's a
like
weird
whatever,
Uber
like
driver.
yeah, he was telling us like this crazy ass story, and then like I was like kind of like, all right, I mean this is like whatever, like I'm not gonna like give him shit, like I don't really care, like also like getting stripped, like you can do whatever you want, but then halfway through it he mentioned like he has a wife and kids at home and shit, and I was like, and my INFJ friend was like sitting right next to me, and he was like he's kind of like making conversation with him, but then once he said like the thing about him having a kid and a wife at home, and he was like doing this shit like well he was like taking people home, like fucking like having sex with like strippers at night when his like family's at home and shit, I got like really pissed in the car, like I just completely like stopped talking, and like I was just like, and after we left the Uber I was like talking, I was like really pissed, and like telling my friend like, bro, I can't believe like why were you talking to that guy? I was like all pissed and shit.
That genuinely upset you.
Yeah, like he was like going out like having like sex with like strippers, like his wife and kids are like, I don't know, I was like, it just really like I don't know,
No,
like
I
got
feel
to me,
that
I don't
like
know, it just
completely
Was it
turns
like
you off to
a
that person
cultural
completely.
thing,
Real?
or is
This
this
is
person
okay.
just like like an
I think it's more of
asshole?
I don't know if this is a
um
morality issue, but like
Oh, sorry. Wait, are we allowed to swear?
I mean,
Yeah, go
they're
ahead.
swearing this whole time. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Was this guy just like an asshole? Or was this like a cultural thing?
what culture would like even
Yeah.
like I don't
That's
know, like,
wait,
Well,
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
just
we're
need
not we're not
people.
gonna get
you
into
said
that.
if you
But
said Uber
sorry.
driver in a certain, never mind. Because I don't want to.
no, but okay. I mean, we don't even have to get into that. It's just the
We
fact that
won't
I'm
get
pretty
into
sure
this.
he lived in a Western society. I'm pretty sure his wife would be like not okay with him like
No,
fucking
yeah, it's so
strippers,
funny
Yeah,
though because you're talking
yeah.
about how
right?
that made you mad, and I feel like in my mind, and I can't, I've never been in that situation, but in my mind, I'm like, I feel like that would just make me highly uncomfortable, but
Here's
it wouldn't
like
make
where
me
Yeah,
like
it's like a very
extremely
personal thing to
upset.
share.
here's my perspective. It's like if that
He
guy's
was
doing
proud
all
of it
that,
though.
Creek
like
sounded like you were pissed.
He was proud. No, it's the fact that he was like bragging about it, like to
yeah.
like random people. Like it's weird, bro. Like why
Yeah,
are
and
you
then
Was
telling
like
it?
what
us
does
this?
that
Like
tell you about him as like a person? Like that's like what I would be
right,
thinking. Like
Dang,
yeah.
that
yeah.
empathy feature is not showing as much, huh?
No, but
And
like
I share that sentiment, but I feel like for INFJs, for example, they may have this thing where they're like love everybody. Everybody is to be loved, and almost have like this Christian principle of like everybody is redeemable, right? That's like a high FE trait to have. Whereas
Mhm.
INFPs, they may have this thing where it's like, if you do something wrong, then I'm not going to love you. I'm not going to like reward you with endearment. And you see a lot of like FI activist posts online like this. It's like love everyone unless they're like this derogatory thing. Like love everyone unless they're
Conditionally based love,
transphobic. Love
yeah.
everyone unless they're set like those things. So do you guys think that like do you guys as INFPs, do you guys think it's a low that you guys may like isolate people from being immoral? Or do you guys just think like it's reasonable to isolate people who are immoral?
well, I think it like depends on like what the certain quality is that like sets you off. Because I think there's certain instances where like if somebody does something or says something or like yeah, it's reasonable to like cut that person off or like not want to associate with that or like think of them as like an immoral person. But that could definitely be taken to an extreme where it could be extremely unhealthy, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's more in the sense of like a morality sense. Like, of course, everyone's gonna have a different way of judging who they cut off and why they cut them off. But do you think the sense of like how? Because I'm so interested in this. Do you think in the sense of how INFPs, and once again, I don't want to stereotype like Creek said.
Mm-hmm.
But to that extent of like Creek sounded pissed at this man.
I mean,
Like,
here's my perspective.
I'm not saying that
I
what
can't
he's
speak
doing
for
is
Creek,
right.
but like
Yeah,
I would just be like, well, what the fuck does that tell you? Like who that guy is as a person if he's like bragging to people about it. it's like, why is that something that should be bragged about? It's like I would just like not want to talk to the guy at all. If I was in that Uber, I'd be like, "Dude, shut the fuck up."
I'll simplify it to this so we can stay on topic. Do you guys think that people who do bad things should still be loved?
Man, that's a difficult question.
No, bro. Honestly, like, I mean, no, because I mean, it depends. But at the same time, like, I'm like more like my view on like whether I like people is based on their intentions. Like,
Yeah.
if you're a good person or not. So, like, if they've done bad things but they want to be better, it's like, okay, cool. You want to be better. So it's about your intentions. But if they like the thing with the guy is he was proud of it. Like, if you're proud of like a negative action, that's why like I don't just like I don't I'm not gonna like you like if you're proud of like the negative things you're doing. So
I
I'm
agree
like
with Creek on
my
that
thing is based on
100%.
intention.
I mean,
think
Creek, doesn't that like
association-
fall into like? Oh, sorry, Jay.
No, you go.
No, I mean, like, doesn't that just like fall into like individual actions then? Because then it's like, you know, well, they had good intentions for this one thing that they did, and then you know, obviously bad intentions for like another. So it's like, I guess, how like as you would you have to like count all of those as a whole then and get like an average, right?
You can make
To
the
say, like,
argument
this
that
person's
as an
bad.
INFP, if you've seen everything about everyone, hypothetically, if that was ever possible, if you like looked at someone and you knew like all of their traits, I would argue that there's probably like something in like 90% of people that you would be like, that is fucking reprehensible. And it would be very hard for you to see them the same way. So do you feel like that is a challenge within you? Or do you feel like it's a good thing that you have that within you?
For me, it's definitely a challenge because it's like, it's hard to like forgive or like when somebody does something like reprehensible like that, it's hard to like I don't know, forgive or whatever. I struggle with that, but that's something definitely I've been trying to work on is just like letting go, you know.
I mean, I would say overall it's like a process though. Like if you, I mean, I don't want to like simplify this too much, but you're either like going up or you're going down, like in terms of like I don't know, in terms of like pleasing some sort of like ideal or like some sort of like framework of morality, right? And if obviously if you've done like if someone's done like a reprehensible thing, one reprehensible thing or two, like I'm not gonna be like, wow, you've done this, I'm never gonna talk to you. But it's like, are you actually like trying to like project an ideal and work towards it? That's what I would say is like is an overall thing. And if you aren't, and if you're like content with like being an overall immoral person, and that's just based on what I consider moral, like, because like I'm gonna judge you based on what I think is good and bad, right? And if you're working towards, like, I don't want to say like you have to act the way I want you to act, but I mean, in a sense, you kind of have to, otherwise I don't like you. I mean, like, why would I spend time around someone I don't like?
That's what you're saying.
Okay, so
like,
but my question is to that like the Bible when it says love everyone, for example. And I feel like people are gonna listen to this and think I'm like some Christian because I'm using the Bible as a model. I'm not even a Christian. But I'm just saying, like in the Bible where it says love everyone, do you feel like that's neurotic, or do you feel like love is a proactive thing that you can blossom within yourself? Because the way that you're saying it just sounds like, well, I'm going to like you if you do the right thing, and if you don't do the right thing, I'm not going to like you, and I can't change that within me. But the way that you're saying it, it feels like love is more like just like a reaction to you, as if like you don't believe in proactive love, for example. You don't believe like the ideal of loving everybody, because to love everybody, it's not like this feeling of warmth you would feel for the same way like you would feel in the same way where you love your mom, for example. It would be a different process, but I still do think there is a possibility that you could go out and love everyone. And for you to do that, it would be a proactive love. So do you just not believe that you can access that kind of love for everybody, or do you just not believe that that love is real?
I think it's like the old like therapist thing where people are like, if you don't want to be helped, like you can't be helped. And like in terms of loving everyone, like I love everyone like
So
equally.
you feel like
right?
love
Because
is an agreement of someone's character then?
yeah, but I'm not gonna like that's you said it earlier. I'm not gonna reward negative behavior. So like I just don't feel comfortable
Why is
being
love a
around
reward
people.
system?
I was literally about to ask that. Why is love seen as a reward in your eyes?
What do you mean? Why is love seen as a reward in my eyes? Like, I'm. It's not like I'm gonna give you love because you've acted the way I want you to like behave, or like I'm gonna give you like love no matter what. Like, I'm not gonna like.
That's what it
I'm
sounds
not gonna.
like.
Okay. Look, I'm not gonna treat you negatively, but I just don't understand, like, because I'm just saying I don't understand why I have to spend time around people who do reprehensible things and
you don't
constantly
have-
like, go
I think
against my
there's-
moral code. You know?
You don't
think
have to,
that-
but my idealistic sentiment is that the world to work in the most optimal way, love would have to be the foundation.
I mean,
and it seems like what you and Max is saying is more like, well, I'll love you if you do the right thing.
well, no.
But I feel
I
like
don't
the
think that's
world
what
would
they're
just
saying.
work
I
out
think
the
Max.
best.
Yeah.
You can
I think
love
Max is saying more something along the lines of like, and Max is like, he's accepting the pros and cons that comes with a mentality like that, because to some extent the pro is if you're doing things that I disagree with, then of course I don't wish to associate.
Yeah, I mean,
But at the
it's not that I like wouldn't love that person. Like I've had like people, and everybody's had people that have hurt them. I mean, just because you don't want to like associate or like have a relationship with that person, that doesn't mean you don't love them. You know?
And that's the pro of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Creek, I feel like you're more associating. Maybe you're just wording it wrong, Creek. But I feel like your association and standard on basis of loving people is the same way of like.
I mean, I think I would differentiate between liking someone and loving someone because, like, if I like said, I think like I probably agree with you in terms of like love should be like the foundation of everything, but I would look at that as an encapsulating thing, like a system of love. But I don't think I have to, just because of the fact that I'm not trying to punish someone when I don't like them. It's just a boundary thing. Like I don't want to harm the way I live my life because like it is harming me if I spend time around someone that is doing reprehensible
Do
things
you
and
think
like
you have to be
acting in a very
around
immoral
someone
way,
to
right?
actively love them? You don't think you can just love on people from a distance?
I mean, how could you do that? How could you love someone from a distance?
Avidly hoping they become a better person, but
Yeah,
understanding
that's
that-
what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
Wanting
That's
the
what I'm
best for
saying,
that
yeah.
person.
I hope everyone. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to like put these people in prison or anything. I mean, I hope they get better, right?
You hurt you.
But I don't.
You hurt my morality. Go sit in jail.
There's a lot of INFPs that would do that.
No, but like, I have a question. All right, I have a question. I mean, if like we can
There's
take it to the
literally
extreme, like, would
INFPs
you?
that think like you should go to jail if you vote for Trump. Like I guarantee you, there's INFPs that think that before. But go ahead.
Okay,
Pete.
I mean, well, okay, that's kind of extreme, but I would just say like, would you guys spend time like around a murderer, like you had like a mafia like friend or like a gang member,
I'm the
like who's your
wrong
friend?
person.
Yeah,
to
but you
ask.
can
I'm the wrong person. to
Yes.
ask.
Well, it just
Wait, like,
it
as
depends
a
if they
friend,
feel
like,
bad
for
or
no
they're trying to help
other
themselves.
purpose, like.
No, they don't feel bad. That's what I'm saying. Like they're okay with killing people. Like, would you guys spend
But
time
you can
around a
still
person
love
like
that person and hope that they get better and hope that
I
they're
think
able to
if
see.
you see love as an endorsement for someone, then it's inherently a reward system. And I don't think love should be a reward system. Like my version of love isn't like I like a stamp of approval for the things you do. My version of love is like I will support you.
Kitten, were you gonna say something?
I can hang around a murderer because I have good
Yeah,
intentions
sorry, I'm
for
like
that
being
murderer
really
still, even though they murdered.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I probably
Like
agree
I
with
think
that.
I agree with Krieg. If you, yeah,
Wait,
I
what?
think I
I
agree
kind of
with
disagree.
Krieg.
I
What
mean,
he was
I
saying
disagree
about
with Creek to
no,
a degree. I mean,
Wait, what part do you disagree
I
with? I
think-
don't understand.
I assume
Hold on,
you're
let's like
kidding.
give Kitten a chance to speak because they haven't gotten to speak yet.
no, I'm like coughing off a lung. It's fine. No, I agree with Krieg. Like, I mean, I get what you mean by like not seeing it as like a reward system, but I guess like that's sort of how culturally we have learned love to be, is sort of like this thing that you're not meant to share with like everybody necessarily. Like it's like a personal deep emotional thing that you should only have with like with certain people. So it's like, I guess those statements, like egalitarian statements, right, like, we need to share this with everybody, probably is going to be intimidating for most people.
I think
And
it's intimidating, but it's something that we're kind of taught to some extent. I feel like unconditional love is something that's very much taught to the masses, and we just choose to ignore it because of the basis of our relationships.
It's
What?
foreign. And
Unconditional
the people that
love?
say that they do support it, like the same people that say that they do support it, many of them, if they were near a murderer, they would not love that person. But what are you saying, Matt?
No, that's fair.
Oh, I was gonna say unconditional love has been something I've been thinking about for like the past few months, because it's like, should you just love somebody like out of like, say like a family member or something? Should you love them unconditionally just because they're family, like because you're related by blood, or
I think that's something an INFP would struggle with more than.
That's something I've certainly struggled
Well,
with, is like
definitely
the
as a
idea of
person, but like
unconditional
that's.
love.
definitely-
Wait, hold
is
on.
that like
I would
a FI like problem?
Yeah,
What?
I
feel
would
like
think
that
so.
is-
Yeah,
Like that kind of thing. That's like something inherent with like any FI. Because I mean, I definitely like also, and I mean, I'm not an IFP, but
I think every
also
human's
agree with
question
that.
it,
Like
but I understand why INFP specifically, or anyone who actively uses FI. I guess that's strong.
I don't think just to bring it back to what Shane said. I don't think our society practices unconditional love. I think they
I don't think
practice
they
the opposite
do. I think
actually.
they talk a lot about it. I think
Yeah.
they kind of like try to. They
But
try to.
everything,
They
hold on,
virtue
everything
signal
is everything is literally like the school system, like all laws are like based upon like if you do this thing, we will reward you. If you don't do this thing, we'll put you in prison. Like either like you're gonna go to detention if you don't do this. Like or like even parents, like if you don't do this, you're gonna get like grounded. Like it's like
Right.
you're like being like restricted from doing what you want, and if you act a certain way or behave a certain way, you're punished for it, and you're not loved for it. And you're like people's love for you is conditioned like based upon how you act around them. Like so, I'd say like most of love is conditioned, and how people use love is like
Right,
heavily
right.
conditioned.
We do have to transition to
Mm.
the second function here, but I will just say that I feel like there is a thing where as a culture we do have this like struggle to separate doing bad from being bad. I feel like INFPs have that struggle too, because there may be context that does make way for somebody to do a negative behavior, or it could just be them being overwhelmed that leads to that negative behavior. It doesn't make it permissive, but I think INFPs struggle to separate doing bad from being bad. And that initial charge that INFPs get when they see somebody do something they don't resonate with, I think acts as a block for them to think clearly. And I think that without debate, creates problems for them.
Fair enough.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the second function of INFPs. And this is one that me and Shane also share as our first function. So, Shane, you may want to comment on this because this is how you filter the world as an ENFP. The second function of an INFP is extroverted intuition. Extroverted intuition is the process that gathers information and conceptualizes the outside world. It notices possibilities. It visualizes possibilities to make them concrete. It deals with the external, but it is the least extroverted of all the extroverted functions because it is more of a creative function. Extroverted intuition is just fascinated with the idea of things. So you may hear INFPs say that they like the idea of doing something more than they like doing something. Or you may hear INFPs say that they can't finish a song because they always think of a new idea and then they get stuck on the new idea. Or INFPs say like they're daydreaming, and that's essentially their extroverted intuition acting up. But we can just like summarize extroverted intuition being the function that asks what if. It's the function of possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, just to put my perspective on that, I oftentimes I always feel like the idea is better than like the reality. You know what I mean? Um, but I think that's like a very common INFP thing to say. You know, because I think we tend to spend so much time like in our heads that like you create like these overly idealistic ideas or views. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, I just think that's like a very INFP thing.
Yeah, and I know Shane and Creek, seeing you guys make art, I see that you guys both struggle with your NE because your NE does it always just asks like, let's just do this thing, let's just do this thing, let's just do this thing. And you guys have both shown me music, for example. And in the moment you're so passionate about that song, but then months later you don't even care about that song anymore because you're on to the next thing. And now you're like deep into the idea of like, oh, this next song, this thing that I'm working on, this is going to be it. And then it passes again. So like me as an ENTP, extroverted intuition is cool, but I feel like it can make me so inconsistent if I don't control it that it creates struggles for me. But I feel like I feel bad for the people around me because I feel like I could be chaotic and like hard to predict with my NE and like my constant like let's do this thing, let's do this thing, what's that, what's this, like I feel like it could be hard for other people to manage being around me because of it. And it's definitely like it definitely brings me struggle because it makes it hard to be consistent. So I would just ask you guys as high NE users, how do you guys experience extroverted intuition and what kind of problems has extroverted intuition brought about for you?
Creek, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Oh, you can go ahead.
I would just like to say that this is a very serious problem in my life because I'm so caught up, I guess, in concepts. And it's funny, Alan, I remember I ironically, because I was just saying, Creek, that's so crazy that you got mad at that man for like doing something stupid. But I remember actually getting very upset one time when I showed you, Alan, and our friend Xavier. I showed you guys a song, and I remember you guys hating the song. And I was like, how could you hate it? The meaning behind it, the concept, and I really like looking back now, that song is just simply an okay song. But the concept had me so I was obsessed with the idea. And the fact that you didn't like it because you like didn't care about the concept, I guess, of that song in that moment was just infuriating. And I've definitely I remember on my old laptop when I was making music, I would just start projects of songs and I would get these extremely grandiose or just extremely high thought ideas and then never finish it because I was just like, oh, that's when that's done, that's gonna be awesome. This idea is cool. I'm gonna stick with it. And then I just jump to the next idea. And that's just not for music. That's in almost every aspect of my life. My girlfriend hates that I don't live by plans. Because I'm just a very in the moment kind of like that's how I do. When me and my friends are talking about taking trips, when we're talking about starting, like even this, the fact that we're doing a podcast right now is kind of crazy to me because I've talked about starting a podcast for almost the better half of a year. I remember mentioning it to you, Alan, about a while ago but I couldn't come up with a concept for it, and I felt that it needed one. And because I couldn't, I just pushed off the project and focused on something else. So it's a very serious problem in my life that I need to work on.
For you, Creek.
Yeah. Well, for me, like, it manifests like in a lot of the same ways Shane mentioned, and you mentioned as well, and Max. But I would say mine kind of like, okay. First, I'm gonna talk about like artistically when it comes to like how I use NE. I use NE like for me like in a weird way because like I don't have like a rapid thing where I'm like, oh, okay, new music. Okay, I'm bored of this. New music. Oh, I'm bored of this. Like I don't move between projects like that. I kind of get stuck on one project, and I have like a million ideas for one project, and then it will become like the project will become so crowded to the point where it's like kind of loses meaning because it's just so crowded with like a lot of ideas. And then I kind of like I'm like, okay, this is too complex, and then I have to abandon it. But I spent like 6 months on this thing, and now it's like a big blubber of like mess that makes no sense anymore. And socially, I am NE. I kind of like I have a hard time with like connecting with like a lot of people. And this is like the whole INFP thing where like, we're too like unique and people don't understand us sort of thing. I don't really look at it in that sort of like narcissistic way where I'm thinking I'm better than other people, although sometimes I do. But I just have sometimes I just have trouble like connecting with people because like I'll have like this like random thought and be like, oh, this, and then they'll be like that's kind of random, like that makes no sense like within this context, or like we're like I don't know. That's why I like spending time like around other intuitives or like other NFP types or like NT types because like they can kind of like jump on like a random idea and kind of just build upon it
Yeah.
or just like understand like the like it's just I don't know like
I
it's
relate to that a
spontaneous and
lot.
impulsive, but
The second
yeah,
part
yeah.
you said, I
So like
relate
it's
to that a lot. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like hard to connect with like certain like people because like I don't know, they're kind of just like very like orderly, so they're just like, okay, that has no place here. You don't say that's inappropriate or
Yeah,
like
they
you
don't
shouldn't do
understand that
that.
you
It's
can
just
jump
like
from
yeah.
topic to topic. It's like we become hard to follow. I feel like almost.
Yeah, bro. Also, like that's like a huge thing on like Yubo debates. Like when they're like a lot of times you'll like start a conversation and then you move it to another topic, like to connect it back, and then just be like, "Wait, I thought we were talking about this." And it's
Yeah, but
like
they don't
you
see that
can
jump
Yeah.
go
back and
from
forth.
topic to
Like,
topic. It's like
yeah,
It's hard for
yeah.
them to see how
So
those
it's like
two
a
things
matrix.
connect.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I noticed, like you said, like expert intuition makes it hard for you to socialize. I feel like there's this skewed perception of ENTPs. Like online, we're skewed, like we're painted as people that are like socially charismatic, or we move situations like effortlessly, or just like we're good at socializing, so to speak. I feel like I struggle with socializing because like with other extroverts, it's almost as if extroverted intuition ruins the mood with them. Because I conceptualize extroverted intuition like a playground, and like I've talked to other intuitives, and they've been like, I just feel like I'm a kid who's on a playground and I'm on an adventure and I'm just doing whatever. But I feel like they don't understand like that's actually what extroverted intuition feels like. Because to me, a playground is like, oh, I'm gonna go on the swings now. I'm gonna go on the slide. I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna like, and it's like all of these random things that you do. And when I'm with people and hanging out, we may be planning to go do one thing, and I'm like, oh, we should do this thing now, or oh, we should do this thing now. And instead of like being in the conversation, I'll even think like we could be having this sort of different conversation. Or as they're talking, I'll be conjuring up possibilities in my head. And I feel like it's just hard for other people who aren't intuitives to mess with, especially people that aren't extroverted intuition users.
This is
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's like a disconnect on both sides because I've just like when you talk about like the playground thing, it just reminded me like when I was a kid, like I would just like daydream like when the teacher would talk or like even when I'm talking to like my mom about like something like, hey, did you pack your lunch or whatever, I'm just gonna like conversations like that, or when she's talking about like did you clean the house or like something, a lot of times I'll just like zone out. So there's always this like disconnect, and then I'm just like thinking about like, whoa, like did I like just like something random like, oh, what am I doing tomorrow, like just like constantly like a disconnect between like certain types, I would say, just because like I can't like resonate with like talking about like things like that, even though like it is beneficial to talk about things like that sometimes, like sensory things where it's like you need to get this done and this done, but like it just literally it kind of eats away at me, like especially when I'm at work and like all they're like, Zach, did you do this, like did you get this done, like what time are like, and I'm just like, oh my, just shut the fuck up, please, because it's so annoying, like constantly like talking about like what I should be doing and how I should be doing it and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Quick point, and then Max and Shane could say their thing. I feel like this is one of the negative things to like TikTok woke shit, or the way that TikTok quote unquote educates people. Because INFPs that think they're disassociating, they're probably just fucking daydreaming. They may just be having extroverted intuition moments, and they think they're disassociating. So they're not present all the time because sensing is one of their latter functions, and they think they're mentally ill. They may just be an INFP, and that's like a different question, because some INFPs think that INFP like is a mental illness. I don't hold that point of view, and I feel like what INFPs tell themselves is disassociation. It may be disassociation sometimes, but there's also a possibility that it may just be them experiencing extroverted intuition, and then the narratives that they're attaching themselves to makes it seem worse than it is to experience extroverted intuition. But Shane and Max, what point were you going to make?
I was just gonna say it's funny because I'm kind of doing it right now. Like my brain is definitely like wandering, and that's not to like say that this conversation is interesting. It's extremely interesting to me, but at the same time, my brain's just like I don't know. I guess it's just the way it operates. Like it's thinking about when am I gonna go to bed? What am I gonna do? You know what I mean? Like that's just like
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I've always been like that, and it was why I had trouble in school, and I'm diagnosed ADHD, uh, technically ADD, but they're linked now. I think that's what they said. So, but I remember my parents, because I think both. I don't know their personalities, but I'm pretty confident they're both. Or at least my dad's a sensor. But I remember them struggling so hard to understand why I was like this. Not necessarily saying that because of my personality type, I'm like, oh, this is why I'm like this and stuff. But more of like understanding self and the way I operate is like, dude, this is kind of how like that's just how I operate and how I work. Um, but it's like watching other people try and figure it out was always funny to me. I don't know.
With Max, I've seen Max have extroverted intuition. Like this, I think this is the FINE combo in INFPs. Like I've seen Max have extroverted intuition where Max has like this FI moment where he's like super triggered about something, and he's like, "That's it, I'm going to work on this." And like he'll set plans. Like he's been like, "I'm gonna meditate every day. I'm gonna work out now. I'm gonna go." Then like 3 days into doing it, he's like,
oh no, man.
"Ah, man, I'm just gonna hang out. I'm just gonna hang out with my friend today, man." Like,
No,
as soon as he no longer feels congruent to do it, he just does something else, and then I'll call him out on it. I'll be like, "Max, like 3 days ago, you were like, nah, I promise, I'm about to get on my health. I'm about to," and you're already done with it. And he'll like laugh at it, like, "I know." So it's like, extroverted intuition like has it like Max is the sub of extroverted intuition for sure.
No, yeah, there's been many times that I've done that. Yeah.
Okay. And then the third function of INFPs is introverted sensing. And this is the sensing function that basically recalls past experiences so you can organize your life. So you can see it as a memory function. It's just like, it's basically like the question, what do I need to do today? Or just like recalling like things that you've done so you know what to do in the future. Or like ISFJ moms, they'll go to the zoo and they'll be like, oh yes, the zoo is organized this way. So like if you watch like ESFJ, ISFJ moms, every fucking time they go to the zoo, they do this shit where they're like, well, zoo is organized this way. So first we're going to go see the lions, and then we'll go see the tigers, because if we see the tigers, I know that that exhibit closes at 1 and we can still get there by 12. Whereas like us being high NE users, we'll just fucking walk around the zoo and then like go look at whatever we feel like looking at in the moment. You guys have SI as a latent function, and it's one of your underdeveloped functions, so it makes it hard for you guys to plan.
Oh,
And
God,
this is
yeah,
actually this is actually the last function of mind and chains. And this function being so low is why I hear INFPs say they lack motivation, for example, because they'll only do something when they're in like this SI grip. They'll get in these modes where they're just like they're really hurt. It's like what Max did with like the meditation thing. Like I'm gonna meditate every day. He's like, okay, I'm going to do that. But he only had emotional leverage to do that. You guys struggle. You guys struggle with sticking to plans and creating systems and just being like, I'm going to do this regardless of how I feel. And I feel like that has a lot to do with your SI being underdeveloped.
Oh God, that's like the story of my life. Like the lack of planning. Like every teacher I've ever had could probably tell you that like it's like the lack of planning and yeah.
Yeah. And Creek, how do you experience it as an INFP?
Um, it's I don't know. Like for SI, it's weird because like I just feel like when people say INFPs are destined to be depressed or something, I think it's like because I was just thinking about the function stack that we have, and it just everything like it connects to like negativity. I feel like because like the way I use SI is just thinking about like the past and just like even when Max would talk about WWE, that's like him reminiscing and being like,
WWE, man.
yeah,
Man,
like it's
Yeah.
like reminiscing about the past and being like, oh, things aren't the way they used to be, and just being like sad, or they could be like this and this and this into the
Yeah.
future. They could be like this. That's NE talking, and then SI is like, oh, things could have been like. Especially like I feel like INFPs are apt to like
I remember
have
when
like a
things
negative.
used to be like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
well,
Like we'll have. Sorry, go ahead, Max.
oh no, I was gonna say you almost start to idealize the past, and it's
Yeah.
like, so say you're looking back at like a time period in your life, like for instance, like what you guys are just bringing up, like the 2017 WWE thing that I said.
Mhm.
Probably in the moment wasn't that great, but like you create this idealistic
Narrative.
narrative about it, and it just becomes this like repeating thing, at least with me, where I'm like I get stuck on the past and I'll miss something, but then I have to like check myself because I'll have to be like, am I just looking at this in an overly idealistic and positive light? Because like, was the reality even that great to begin with? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that and like ridiculing yourself because you didn't do a certain thing, like
Yes.
especially like having conversations and being like, damn, I should have said this,
Well,
but you didn't say it. Like that, I'm angry, like that sort of thing, you
It's
know.
very self-defeating because I can only speak for myself, but I'll like be like, man, why the fuck didn't I do that? And I beat myself up over it, and it almost prevents you from doing it because you're beating yourself up so much. And it's just this horrible pattern. At least that's what I experience.
Yep. So we're going to transition to the last function, and I'm going to ask you guys some of the overarching questions that I wrote down. The last function of INFPs, not technically the last functions, but in their main function stack, which is their first 4 functions, is extroverted thinking. And this is the function that tries to make the external world more rational by employing precise definitions onto the world. So TE will show up with INFPs. Well, they'll just be like, this is wrong, right? And you'll try to challenge INFPs on why something is wrong, and they'll be like, I don't want to talk to you. Like, I don't want to hear you out trying to say that like sexists are good people or like something like that. They're like, those people are just bad people, and that's how their TE connects. Honey is or kitten or satire is a high TE user.
Yeah, I
Is a
was gonna
high
say, I was
TE
like, you're
user.
talking about me. You're like,
Yeah,
talking shit.
is a high TE user, and she'll just be like, no, like things are just like this. And me and Kitten have had these conversations where I'll be like, but Kitten, like as an ENTP, I'll be like, but what about this nuanced thing? And Kitten will be like, yeah, but this. Like she'll be able to entertain it, but she more resonates with like the absolute solution. So TI, like my logic function, will extend itself in a latent way, and I'll delay my process of concluding something so that I can get the absolute most encompassing solution of how things work. And PE users, they more so want to know what's functional. So they don't care like what's the most true about the world, for example, but they just care more so what works out in the world. And this is why like INTJs are more conscientious than ENTPs, for example, because TE is kind of an organizational function. It just wants to focus on facts and raw data so that it can make like quick solutions. So like if you talk to a high T user, they'll just be like, I don't care, this just is the way it is. Like ESTJ managers, they're like, well, you came to work, expect to work. Like you'll tell them like my cousin is dying or some shit, some crazy shit. And you're like, well, it's work. You come here. You were supposed to come here today. You're here. The way I see it, you're gonna work. That's like TE in action.
Oh,
And
that sounds like me.
this is the last function of INFPs. So for them, it's difficult for them to come to these conclusions of like, that's just the way it is. And what I've seen is INFPs become attached to this because it takes them so long to conclude things that when you challenge the way that they've concluded things, it really upsets them because they have taken like personal time to curate their solution. And there's not a lot of things that INFPs are sure on. So like the things that they are sure on, they hold it dearly. And this being the last function of you and Max Creek, I don't know how you guys experience it, but if you do have any comments on it, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm not really that well acquainted with like how TE works because it's my lost function, but I think my awareness of it has been kind of I picked it up from talking to Kitten because I've just kind of seen the clashes like in our personality, like because like the way we have
We've had
conversations.
so many like
Yeah,
disagreements over
right,
things,
because
and like
like
mainly semantical stuff, right?
yeah, because her conclusion will be like, but like I don't know. She'll come to a conclusion, and then I'll be like, "Oh, okay, I don't know if I agree with that." But then I don't know. She'll be a lot more like, "Oh, okay, well, this is just how it is." Like, and a lot more like conclusive about it than I am. So I don't know. That'd be like in relation to how she uses it.
It
Is the way
has
like
an
that I understand
aversion
it.
to subjectivity on like a biological level. Like you'll be like, but Kitten, what about this circumstance? She's like, this is just the way it is. Like, it's just how things are.
Wait,
Like,
I don't think I mean, I kind of have said that, but like, I mean, I don't believe necessarily in objectivity, but I guess my view on like subjectivity is like we require some sort of organization to make sense of like the chaos, right? So like, I guess the TE for me is like trying to organize everything, even though I do agree that it's probably subjective,
yeah.
or
Do you
that
think
there is
that
subjectivity.
could happen? I mean, I guess that's how I view it too. In some sense, is like making some organization. That's how
Mm.
I just always kind of viewed it. Like even for I kind of for everybody. Do you think? Well, Max, do you kind of view it like that? And if not,
Wait,
I'm
what do you
curious.
mean?
Well, do you view it as kind of like trying to gather and make sense of a lot of things? Because I'm curious if it is that, then could it be kind of dangerous for? I don't want to say dangerous, but like challenging also for an INFP. But like if we're talking,
INFPs are just walking depression machines.
I would have to agree on that, Alan.
What?
What? I
you're
mean,
like, I don't know
hey,
what you're
no,
talking about.
what?
Oh, bro. Okay, I just okay. Well, like with TE, I don't understand. Like, maybe this is why people consider like ENTJs and INTJs to be cold because like they. Well, I don't think. I mean, like, I don't think they're necessarily cold, but they act cold, and they like when they're just like it's like the example you gave about like your cousin dying, and then they're just like, well, we still
Get
have like
ignored.
8 hours
This
to
is your
go.
workplace.
Like yeah, I don't understand like. Maybe like a developed INTJ or like an ENTJ could understand why like the value in like giving someone time off after a relative died, like their cousin died. I feel like that'd be fairly obvious. I don't know like why not like someone would like
Let me give an example, right? Let's talk about INFPs and their TE grips. Have you guys ever seen an activist INFP that's just like so impersonal to you that you're like, are you sure you're an INFP? Like, have you guys like just seen an INFP be cold before? Anybody?
I mean, I probably have. I probably didn't know they were an INFP at the time. I feel like
Okay.
I know like the type of person you're categorizing.
So when an INFP is angry, they tend to get caught in what's called a TE grip. These INFPs, they call on TE in times of stress and specifically conflict. When they're in a TE grip, they become cold, angry, disapproving, confrontational, and resentful. So a lot of INFPs that indulge in activism, you'll see them in this grip where you can't even talk to them because they've just decided like, I got to be cold to you. And when INFPs become bitter about the world, a lot of them can become cold and they can get in this TE grip. And I don't know if like Max or
I've been
Creek, you
there.
guys have ever like seen
Yeah.
yourself
Oh,
in that state
100%.
where you're just like you guys are immoral and that's the way it is and you should just do this. Where all of a sudden like you're usually this emotional person, but something just puts you in the state where you just go cold. That is the TE grip, and that's how that is what gets a hold of INFPs.
Oh, I've been there many times. Many times.
How do you experience it?
Well, I mean, I guess somebody could do something that like I mean, it depends on the severity, but if it's something severe and it could cause me to kind of just like become completely cold with the person or the situation, whereas like normally I feel like I would be very like open-minded and empathetic and like try to understand, but like if it's something like I'm just like I feel very strongly about, like yeah, I can become cold and resentful, you know what I mean?
Right. Do you see this within yourself, Creek?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I get confrontational, but like usually when I get angry at people, it's not outwards, it's inwards, and I don't typically hold grudges, but I will like it's tough because I will just kind of hold it against them, but like not actively, like more passively. Like I'll just hold it at the back of my head and be like, next time they make like a mistake or something, I'll be like, oh my god, I fucking hate you. Like so, like, but I'll kind of build it up, which is a negative thing. It's something I want to change, but like, I would say that's like the TE working because like when someone like violates like a boundary that I have, I'll be like, okay, um, I'm gonna do this and this and this and this to make sure they don't do this again, and kind of like build a plan. That's probably like SI and TE like kind of working together. Like when I get in that grip, like trying to make sure it doesn't happen again, and being like, I've had like I'm gonna stand up for myself, but I do it in an internal way, and where I'm just like think about it for days. Like if someone like says like if I was like in class, I remember and said something rude to me, and I'll be like, I wouldn't say something back, and I'll just be like, okay, yeah, that's cool, and then and then I'll just think about it for weeks and be like, yo, like I can't believe they said that to me. But I've noticed this in Max too, because like he has like a problem and he can't stop like thinking about it. He constantly like
It
bringing it
becomes
up like
obsessive.
wow
Yeah, you like
No,
yeah,
obsess
it's like
over
an
it.
no, he
obsession.
gets in. Max gets in this state where we're playing Warzone and we're talking about something else, and we're like, Max, what do you think about this? And he's like, I'm sorry, man, I just can't stop thinking about the situation with
Yeah.
blank person, man. Like he
Yeah.
just loops. He gets in this
Oh
loop,
no, bro.
and I
And
seen
it's
it
only
with my
gotten
friend.
worse.
Seen it with my INFP friend because we were playing basketball, right? And there were like these ESTPs on the other like side of the court, like clowning and shit. And they turned off the lights, for example. They turned off the lights, and he just got so fucking pissed. He was just like, what the fuck, man? Why are they fucking turning off? And I was like, I don't know, bro. Like, just hoop. And then he was mad like the rest of the
Yo,
time. Like
do you
he could not get over it.
do you remember that one time me, you, and Lance were all playing Warzone, and me and Lance kind of butted heads about some sort of strategy, and then I kind of just stopped talking. So this kind of
What?
loops around to what I was going to what I wanted to add was I feel like I personally it could go either one of two ways. I could get extremely confrontational, or I'm like passive and I withdraw, and I mean it will like loop in my head, but like I like almost door slam. You know what I mean? I'm like, I can't. Like I just become super passive. So it really just depends on the situation. But I found myself either being passive or super 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 confrontational, which can tend to get me in trouble sometimes.
Yeah. Does anybody have any comment on the INFP function stack and the way that it organizes itself before we move on to the strengths and weaknesses of INFPs? Take that as a no. So I'm not even gonna just read the descriptions of these strengths. I'm gonna say the strengths. I'll give everybody here a second to react to them. I'll say the weaknesses. I'll give everybody here a second to react to them, and then we'll go to the questions. So the strengths of INFPs are self-awareness, creativity, empathy, open-minded, and passionate people. The weakness, or does anybody want to comment on that? Do we agree with those strengths?
Yeah.
Just go through the weaknesses and then.
Okay. So the weaknesses, I'll say the ones that I wrote down, because I have a doc that I wrote about INFPs, and then I'll read the 16 personalities one. So the weaknesses that I wrote down is unresolved cynicism. I feel INFPs are susceptible to feel defeated by the cruelty of the world, and they'll just stop caring. They'll become cold, confrontational, and egoic if they don't resonate with the world. And they'll build these defensive personas that stray them away from who they actually are. I've seen nihilistic INFPs that are the world doesn't even matter, but they're super emotional about the world not mattering. And you could see that they don't actually feel like that. But this unresolved cynicism just makes them fall into this toxic persona. The other one I have down is selfishness. We already talked about that. And then getting stuck. I feel INFPs, they loop on the same problems because I noticed that you guys feel bad about something and then you'll think about it and think about it and think about it, but you won't do anything about it. You won't create a system to solve that in the long term. And then you'll just stop feeling that emotion. And then you'll be like, well, I'm not feeling the negative emotion correlated to that problem. So the problem's done. I'm not even going to focus on it anymore. And then the problem inevitably shows itself again because you guys haven't solved it. And then you guys loop and loop and loop again. And it's like you guys are in this constant state of reaction. There's little proactivity. And then for the weaknesses on the website, 16 personalities, it says unrealistic, self-isolating, unfocused, desperate to please, I would say hard to please, and self-critical. So how do you guys feel about those strengths and weaknesses?
I feel like with the strengths, it's like the whole shadow thing because with self-awareness, that's being self-critical. I've always kind of meditated on how useful being self-aware is, and I would say as of now I'd probably say it's being more of a negative thing in my life as opposed to positive because I don't ever it's hard to have confidence when you're always oh, I could be better or I could be like this or I'm not doing this properly and I have this flaw in me. This is when you're constantly critical to the point where you're you don't love yourself. It's kind of hard to be happy with who you are at any specific moment. So I would say self-awareness and creativity. You can be creative with all the ways you could fail a certain task, or with creative in how you could, I don't know, not fulfill an ideal or something. So I feel like all the strength is kind of just, at least for me, sometimes they manifest in a negative way. But yeah, that'd be my perspective on it.
I agree, and I think with the self-awareness, I think this is why you do see a lot of depressed INFPs is because we're so self-aware that it becomes frustrating, and then Alan said, you loop on the problem, and then it's little proactivity comes from it because you're not really solving it because once the negative emotion ever stops, you aren't proactive about it anymore. So it takes a while to actually progress. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm going to move on to some general questions about INFPs. Jane or Kitten, did you want to comment on the strengths, weaknesses of INFPs? Anything relating to INFPs?
No.
I mean, I just had a question.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, are we saying that do we think that INFPs are in some sense self-destructive? Then, obviously not all of them, but there would definitely be some that are Yeah,
I
self-destructive
think
with their like
everybody is
strengths.
self-destructive. So it's like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, but I mean, like with the way like Krieg was talking about like how creativity could also be like a weakness as well. I'm like, is that something that inherently, some INFPs feel?
Yeah, I think INFPs are prone to self-consciousness. And I think that they're prone to self-sabotage because they identify with how they feel too much. They're like, I feel this rush of, and like Shane as an ENFP, I'm sure he's seen this in himself too. It's like, I feel this rush of emotion. This is how it is. This is how I feel. And then like, that could literally just be like them being triggered, and it doesn't necessarily correlate with who they are, but they identify with with every feeling they have so much that they may act impulsively in a way that's not in their best interest. And I feel like if they become aware of that, then that is like there's an easy solution for that, or at least there is a solution for that. But the problem is a lot of INFPs build these narratives. Like many of the INFPs who don't know that they're INFPs, they would probably just say, because INFPs, they always like create these stories. They might just be like, well, introverted because of my childhood. Like when I talked, like my parents used to always shame me for talking, so I just stopped talking. And they might create these stories that seem conceivable that aren't necessarily true, that separate them from seeing like quote unquote how things actually are. And this is because introverted thinking is the function of like seeing quote unquote how things actually are, and it's their last function. So I think the biggest barricade for INFPs is they create all of these stories that may make sense or may be conceivable, but they don't necessarily pinpoint what the actual problem is. So they may like create a story on why they are how they are, but it's not actually how they are. And then this may cut them from ever solving the problem. So I do think INFPs self-sabotage with the narratives that they create. Like they self-sabotage with the narratives that they create, and they self-sabotage because they identify with who they are when they're triggered. Like when you're triggered, that's not like who you are. That's like you having a survival response. That's my feedback on it. As Shane, you being an NFP, and Creek and Max, you guys being actual INFPs, how do you guys feel about it?
I'm curious to hear Shane's take on it because
I
of
just
his
feel like
high
everyone's
end.
describing my life now, and that's I'll
No.
take the attack. No, I don't know. I feel like I don't have a strong take of like.
I mean, was there anything you agreed with Alan?
I pretty much agree with almost all of
Do you
it.
think
Okay.
there's a pattern? Do you think there's a pattern of like a self-destructive behavior like within like the way you act?
I agree with Alan when I just said I think everyone's self-destructive. But I mean,
But
within my own actions specifically, yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
And we could talk for an
Definitely.
hour about how ENTPs are self-destructive. Like we could literally just do that with any type.
But I think like I think that's a big thing is you could do it with any type. INFPs in specific, I wouldn't say they necessarily are. I mean, I guess to some extent because they're self-critical and they're also very like enclosed off. So it's like if you're left with your own thoughts and stuff, that
If
probably
you agree that INFPs are susceptible to low self-esteem, then I think that you would also be saying that INFPs are self-destructive in that way, or they self-sabotage good things.
Yeah, and so in those senses, I would agree with it. I feel like the strengths and weaknesses when it comes to like INFPs in general is just like extremely accurate. Just be I feel like accuracy will, but I mean that like every INFP I feel like I've come in contact with has been passionate, creative, and idealistic, but I've all seen them use those in like negative ways. I guess the senses of like they're definitely unfocused and unrealistic in the exact same way. But I don't know if that's a sense of self-sabotage or more of a sense of like I don't know. I feel like I'm pausing, but I'm like I don't want to say that they're like self-destructive because I don't think they are. I don't. I just genuinely don't want to say that. But I mean, I guess maybe to some extent. But like I said, so is everyone.
Yeah. Max and Creek.
No, I just wanted to comment on like the whole INFP being super idealistic thing because like a lot of INFPs I've spent time around, a common trend like among them has been like the just like this idealization of like how the world should be, and if the world was like this, everyone would be happy. And it always has to do with like just like a lot of like just like breaking down societal norms and just letting everyone be how they want to be. And like I resonate with like that take. I'm just curious to like hear like do you guys think that's like too idealistic like INFP? Because like I think Max would agree with like a lot of like a lot of like the INFP takes on like how the world should be. Like, do you guys have like any like aversions to the takes that INFPs have about how the world should be, like in terms of just like individuality and like pursuing what you want, and instead of like being controlled by by tribalism and that whole thing?
I think Kitten would be.
Tribalism's cool. What are you talking about?
Kitten would be the type of
I'm
person who
kidding.
would break down INFP idealism. I think that like INFPs should realize that the world obviously never will be ideal, and there is like something to be said about loving things as they are. And if you can't love things as they are, then what does that say to your relationship in general? Does that say that like is love like your endorsement? Is love a reward system like we talked about earlier? Or is love this thing that you give on to the world because you just want what's best for the world, because you resonate with life in general? Like what life is, you resonate with that. So whatever it manifests itself in, you're still going to support it. Or are you like, I'm only going to support it if it looks like blank? If you are like that, then I can see the strength in it because it moves forward change, and it does bring about like beauty. Like the most of best artists in history are INFPs. So there's something to be said for it. At the same time, you should be mindful of the relationship you have to idealism.
Yeah, well, that's like a conflict that I've had like forever, especially like after getting into like Buddhism and like how they talk about how everything is suffering and you just need to detach from like desire, and just if you focus on the self, then you don't need to change anything, just love the world. And I mean, I resonate with that, but at the same time, and I think there's like the low to that would just be you're kind of you're kind of like a bystander to negative things. I mean, technically, I understand like nothing is negative and everything is just a label. But I mean, we have like boxes on how we define the world, how the world should be, and what we like. I mean, I think it would be wrong to deny these like feelings, these instinctual feelings that we have about like how the world should be, and then like because then how can we make progress if we're just like, wow, we love everything, oh, this negative thing happened, just learn to love it, like everything has like light within it. And I feel like there's to that where you just like change nothing, because then it's just like, everything becomes stagnant because everything is is perfect as it is.
Yeah, you don't want to support stagnation. We're going to move on to some INFP questions, and then we're going to wrap things up. So we was just talk about INFPs and boxes. I've noticed a lot of INFPs have aversion to quote unquote putting things into boxes. Like almost every INFP I've talked to has said the sentence, well, why do you have to put it in a box? So why do you guys feel this aversion to boxes and labels?
Well, I just think there's like a lot of nuance to everything. So it's like when you hear people categorize things like super generalized, like it can be kind of frustrating because it's like, oh my god, there's like nuance to everything, and yeah, that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And you leave out like, I mean, like, because I mean, like, categories have a purpose, right? Like they're so that we can understand things and then put action onto the world so that we reach conclusions. So I'd say the purpose of like categorization and putting things into boxes is to get things done. So I'd say it's like an organizational thing to make the world tangible, to make the world like understandable, intelligible to us. But the negative to that is it like leaves out a lot of things. Like, what do you like put a box around something and you say this is just is how this is how this thing is. You leave out a lot of the things around it, because like when you categorize something, you're cropping it out, like because the world isn't categorized by itself. Like we impose categorization onto the world, so we cut out a lot of things. So I would say it's closed minded if like you're super like organized, and you see everything through boxes and you see everything through like layouts. I would say you're like limiting yourself from a lot of things in the world, and I'd say that's a negative. So why I don't like putting things into boxes, like at least for me.
Yeah, I used to have like such an aversion to like putting things into boxes, but the more that I've like kind of grown, I realized that there needs to be some sort of like archetypes or generalizations that you have to make just for the sake of getting things done. Because yes, there's obviously nuance to everything, but at the same time that can like
Mhm.
limit progress because it's like there are certain instances where you need to generalize and kind of put things into boxes to a degree. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's
Right.
just based on purpose. I completely agree, but like categories are fine as long as they're used for a certain purpose, like for a certain objective. I
Exactly.
think using them, yeah, I think using them without purpose kind of like gets you nowhere. But yeah, I completely agree.
Okay. So I'll include Shane in this question as well.
Whoop, whoop.
So I think NFPs struggle with this sentiment. I'm not going to put any narrative around it. I'll just pose the question as is. Do you guys believe that everybody is unique?
I mean, my first uh, gut feeling to say is yes. Yes, I do think everybody is unique, but I don't know. That's a very loaded question. You know what I mean?
I say yes.
I think everyone has the potential to be unique, but I don't think a lot of people are unique, in
Especially
my
with like TikTok
opinion.
nowadays. Like I feel like people base their personality around TikTok, and it like you lose a lot of that uniqueness with people because they kind of just want to identify with a crowd rather than be their own
Well,
person.
yeah, I think there's like a lot of like danger with being unique anyway. So I don't even think like because like we're sitting here like oh we don't want to say oh like some people aren't unique, but like it's like you being unique isn't like oh this amazing thing because like a lot of times like what's like you could be unique and like go outside and like I don't know do something really like unique, right? Just because something is unique doesn't make it like a good or like good thing, right? So
Yeah.
I don't think yeah that'd be
I
like
think
my
uniqueness. I don't know. Maybe I just misunderstand the definition of uniqueness because to me, uniqueness and the ability to stand out, I kind of separate because when I view someone as unique, I think even people who belong, like the kids who identify with TikTok, I feel like people who identify with TikTok, they all identify with different forms of it, and even the ones that identify with certain forms, like one person's TikTok is like, I feel like this is gonna be the easiest example I could do. One person can be on like crazy activism, communist TikTok, and then the next slide's memes and stuff. That's probably average for a lot of those people. But what I mean by that is the idea that they can be involved in so many things, which is I guess the plus of that platform, being involved in so many different subcultures and ideas. Um, that sense can breed some sense of uniqueness to that individual because not everyone's going to be involved in the same thing. Uh, not everyone. No, there are people who love to box themselves in and just subscribe to one thing. But now more than ever, I think people have this genuine sense of being able to engage in multiple things, use those
wait.
multiple
So
things to identify self, uh,
are
or
you
care for.
saying are you saying because certain people have different interests that makes them unique?
Not necessarily on an interest. I guess I don't know. I feel like half my personality is just based on my interest, but um, I mean
There's really
that's
niche communities on TikTok that,
that.
like, I guess
But I mean the
stem
idea,
away
the
from the
ability.
main idea of TikTok, right?
TikTok is a fucking drug, bro. Because if you ever say something bad about TikTok, there's always the one person that's going to come and be like, "Well, no, because TikTok does it." It's
I'm
like,
that person because I
can
love
y'all just
TikTok.
admit
I'm
that you're
so
addicted to
addicted.
I
TikTok and
use
just
I'm
it,
can't get
so
but
off of
I
addicted.
it?
think it's horrible for society.
Watching on TikTok.
It's
What are y'all
horribly
watching on
addictive,
TikTok?
It's
and
addictive. That's why
I
it's so
think it's
on
just
it.
horrible for
Oh,
society.
activism,
I
you know,
love
Shane.
it, but I say all this to say like I guess interest. Yeah, I guess is the best way to put it. But I mean like, because that's how I categorize someone being unique. Every person. I don't want to. I guess I do it with a mix of experience and interest and personality, because although you can have similar crossovers with certain people, I don't think no two people walk the same story unless we say in a sense of vagueness of like you live the human experience.
Okay,
you've been hurt
Shade.
before.
Look. If we're gonna use that definition of unique, bro, literally, I have a different biological. We can like. I don't think that's a good definition of unique because technically we're all unique because like we all have unique fingerprints. Like, does that make us all unique?
I mean,
Like,
no,
okay,
no, that's what I'm
I would say
saying.
unique as a mindset. I would say unique as a mindset, like how you like. I would say it's like being creative, like willing to stand out from the crowd and like make a video that or like even artists, like even like avant-garde music, like when like musicians in the like 20th century, like when they would make music like that sounds horrible to the ears, like because they just wanted to be unique and make like or even with like Yeezus with Kanye, right? When they first came out, everyone was like, "What the fuck is this?" Because like it sounded so it sounded so weird to our ears because it was so uncommon. Like that's what I would consider unique.
I don't
I would
consider stepping out of
like
the comfort zone uniqueness. I just personally
What?
don't. I just
But
don't.
but then that'd be such a loose definition of uniqueness because you're just saying like
It
we're
is.
all different, so we're all unique. Like
Well, I think it's
mean,
like for him
technically,
to have
Yeah.
for him to
If,
have
if
a
you're
loose
wait,
definition of
if you're
uniqueness.
preaching that difference is uniqueness, then what you're saying is correct. We're all different, therefore we would all have to be unique.
but that's
If
just hold
difference-
on. That's just hold on. That's just that's just the metaphysics of unique. So you're just saying like, oh, like if we look at the
Yeah.
world, it's like everyone's unique. I'm talking about like I think I'm
Like an
looking at it from
ideology,
a
right?
mindset.
Do you think that the
Yeah.
actual somebody needs to
I'm on a
sit
different
down and-
access of the
so-
world than you.
someone needs to sit down and have the mindset. I'm gonna stand out today, and I'm gonna do something that no one's ever done. And
Yeah, that's a
what values
mindset of
uniqueness.
uniqueness.
Eric
See,
can
I
do
just
it.
No, because-
disagree. I don't.
I mean, that
I don't think
mindset
uniqueness
is
By your
Yeah, but-
definition, by your definition, every piece of object is unique because it's in a different place. Because that you're just saying difference is what makes something unique because it's different is unique. Like, I mean, I guess,
Yeah.
but like, I mean, technically yes, but like, I think like uniqueness should be like, at least in this context, is like more geared towards like your outlook into the world, and if you're like okay with like
That's not
stepping
what he asked.
outside
I feel like you're
boundaries.
taking this way deeper than I did. He
That's what he
simply
meant.
asked, "Is that Alan? Is that what you meant by that? Do I think everyone is unique in these?"
That's the way I
aspects of
interpret it.
I didn't want to
works?
put anything behind it. I just wanted you guys to answer as you do. But I think like your answer, it does point to NFP idealism because it shows you want people to be unique.
I do.
Like
I
Creek
really
and
do.
Max, it disheartens you guys to think that people aren't unique because in your worldview and like your attachment to FI, you want to think that everybody is unique. And like
Yeah.
I think that there is like context to every person. You should respect that context, and it's the right thing to do. And you should always understand nuance and things of that manner. But I also think people do fall into archetypes, and your aversion to that is not related to whether or not people don't fall into archetypes or whether or not people don't fall into generalizations. It's more so you guys don't want to believe that people aren't unique.
No, that's fair. I think that's a fair assessment too. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. Of course,
I think-
I think of uniqueness of people.
Yeah, I think everyone has the ability to be unique. But I don't think everyone is unique. I think most people aren't unique, in my opinion. Even though
I mean,
that's
most
like, I
people
don't know.
do try to conform by definition.
Yeah.
Like people go to work and they're like, "Well, this is how my coworker's doing the job, so I'm going to do it like that."
Right.
No,
Right.
yeah, that's fair.
On to the next question. Everybody can answer this, including the great kitten. How do you guys feel about sensors?
Fuck 'em.
Oh, don't get me started.
No,
on
I'm just
that.
kidding.
I hate them. No, I
They're
love
kind of
sensors.
annoying as fuck.
I love sensors.
It's just like I feel like there's overall a lack of depth. You know,
That I fully agree
That's-
with.
that's the
yeah.
Are
first-
you
Frustrating
doing that
part.
podcast thing, buddy?
what is that? What's a podcast? Nah,
See, I keep mixing up like what a sensor is with like other things, so I feel like I don't even know what we're talking about.
Sensors,
based
just
on-
think about anybody who's always talking like small talk. Like you're fucking like.
Oh, I hate
Sensors
those
that comes
people.
over.
I can't
Yeah.
help but
I would
associate
rather them
sensors
just
with,
not
like,
talk
old
to me.
heads. To me, I've associated
Like
sensors
boomers?
with old heads. Kind of like boomers, yes.
Oh, I hate.
But even then, I feel like
boomers.
there's probably boomers who aren't censors, but have some sense of censor mentality simply because of the way they were raised in the environment
They have
they
a
were raised
boomer
in.
mindset.
Like
I don't
this
like 'em.
mentality of like, oh, you have to grow to adapt to life is a very like in my mind censor thing. It's a very conformative like you get old, you get a job, you get a wife, and that's how you did it,
That's
kid.
how
You
it
know what I mean?
is.
Like,
That's how it is,
that's
son.
how life goes. You work 40 hours a week, you come home, drink a beer, and call it a day. Like
Beat
that's
your wife. No, I'm just kidding.
So like essentially people who are like realist. People who
I don't
No.
want to call them
Not
realists. They're not
necessarily.
People who
realists. I would think they're literally
claim
the
to
exact opposite. Almost. They're more
realist, no?
conformist. Conformist. I I would say.
That's why they call it work.
Work shouldn't be enjoyable.
Like
Oh,
people
ew.
Just work.
they don't necessarily find concepts interesting, or they don't like if you say something, they don't find the tangential question to that to be the most fascinating thing. They just find it interesting that they did it. So they'll say, "Yep, I went to the grocery store and I wanted to get some steak, but they didn't really have a lot of steak, so just bought some pork."
I don't know.
You'll be like, "Why are you telling me this?" And so
This
they're
is,
just like, "Well, I did it, so
let me
it's
preface this with
fascinating."
this
Oh, I
because I feel like
really hate that so
people
much.
in people outside of the MBTI community that judge the MBTI community have this like heavy stereotype of us that we just hate censors. And I get it, because to some extent I don't like these monotonous conversations. I don't want to hear the same thing over. Me and my family, like when we go on holidays and stuff, we don't talk about politics because we don't want to start an argument. But what's left to talk about with a bunch of censors? Oh, how's school again?
weather?
How's the, and I'm just like, I'm sick of it. You know, it's gotten to the point where I just lay down on the couch and avoid everyone. But I don't want to say I hate censors because I do think they serve a purpose. I think there
We
is
could
a
all
extreme
admit
purpose
that
in
like
it.
this world would not
It's like
run
cannon
without
fodder.
censors.
Agreed.
They're much more
But I think that
practical
needs to
than
be
that.
said more because I feel like they just get this overwhelming hate. That's, I guess, to some extent
I mean,
understandable
but
from
it's
creatives.
niche. You have to understand that it's niche because this is really a rare thing for censors to be like. If we were just at a public place, most of the people there are censors, and then who's going to be the group that's isolated? It's going to be intuitives. So like this is a rare thing. Like I feel like part of the reason that it is like this is because we're usually the ones on the receiving end. We're the people where we're seen as odd for not finding it interesting that they went to the store to get pork.
I mean, no, it's fair. It's like,
Yeah, like as an INFP, I feel like it's difficult for me to maintain friendships or relationships with censors, just because I feel like there's like not a lot to connect with. You know what I mean? I
that's
don't know.
fair.
It's just difficult for me. Like obviously there are censors in my life, and there always will be, but it's just I feel like I don't get as deep of a connection as I do with like an intuitive. You know what I mean?
And you can sense the lacking depth because when you take these conversations to these sort of places, censors, they won't be able to add to the conversation, I've noticed. They'll more so just be like ISFPs, for example. I noticed they'll just be like, man, I love deep conversations. I love the fact, and it's like, okay, so you don't have anything to add to it. And they're like, I just live for this, like I don't get to talk like this if anybody else. And it's like, okay, so if you enjoy
It's
the
like a skip.
conversation, then why can't you add anything to the conversation?
Oh, real quick anecdote. This will be like the last thing we can say. We can, keep moving on. But I'm in a band with someone who's a censor, and that's no problem. That's my homie. That's my guy. But we let him write one song. And for me, music is like a very, at least specifically heavy metal music. Since I fell in love into it with specifically Christian metal, I found a way that you could use like certain religious symbolisms to be so symbolic and beautiful. And I love when people write like that. And the song he's written is the most bluntly, just in your face kind of like love song ever. And I really hope he doesn't hear this podcast because it's my least
Oh.
favorite song I've ever heard. Like it's not bad. It's just like the lyrics are like they don't speak to
Yeah.
me. It just sounds like someone sat down and just like, oh, right. It's almost like a to-do list of like the
I'm
struggles.
singing a song.
The song is
I'm
like
writing
it's
a
a love
song.
song about how like he fully can't commit to love somebody. And I'm like, that's such a deep concept. And it's just like, I struggle to love you.
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
One
are you
thing
gonna
that
add
I
it to the
noticed with
album though?
censors. What?
I was saying Shane should add it to the album though. I want to hear it.
It's gonna
Oh,
be
yeah.
on the album. I still love the song. It's actually really well
Yes.
One thing
instrumentally
that
and stuff.
I
It's
noticed
really good.
about censors is they made me think more cynically on why people give advice. Because like the blind presupposition you could have to people giving advice is like, oh, well, somebody's giving me advice, so they want what's best for me. But what I've learned over time is like there's an aspect of that, but there is an aspect where people just want to be in the position to give advice, and they want to be like, for example, like me. All of the value I'm getting out of this isn't just like saying information. This is something that like I want to say. Like there's a part of me, like my shadow self, that wants to be seen as the person doing this, or like has a self-image about being the person on the podcast saying this thing. And censored made me actualize that in everyone, because like censors will give you advice that doesn't even correlate to what's going on in your life. Like you'll say some struggle that there's advice to be given, like actual contextual advice to be given, and they'll just be like, well, yeah, I mean, that's life. You do what you do. You just get older and you just keep on fucking living. I mean, what are you going to do about it? You just go. And it's like, well, why even say that? Like, what value does that have? Like, and you could tell they just want to say something. But yeah, if everybody's
Good
done with the
advice.
censors, if anybody's done with the censors, we can move on to the next question.
We have to
Yeah.
move on. We like censors. I just want to say that.
Okay, so
Yeah, sensors are lit.
INFPs, do you rely on motivation to get things done?
The concept of motivation, it's like, oh yeah, I'll do it when I feel motivated to do it, but then it's rare that the motivation comes, because you don't feel like fully congruent to it.
Creek.
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
He's daydreaming again.
Obviously, I'm not daydreaming. I was though. I don't. I do and I don't. Like I obviously like I do rely on motivation to get things done, but I have like bursts of motivation that last for like a couple weeks, and then I'll do something for a couple weeks, and then I'll stop. So they're like, at least like they're a little bit like not as short lived as they used to be. So like I've kind of like gotten into like systemizing it. So like I'm become a little bit more self aware. So I know that if I set up like if I think of like an idea or like something to do or like it's something a new project to pursue, I know I'm gonna lose motivation like within a week. So I've like gotten better at like setting up systems so that I don't lose motivation. So yes, but I've kind of gotten better at handling it. Is um would be my conclusion.
Okay. Other question. Do you, as INFPs, feel other people's feelings? And Shane, you can answer this as an ENFP as well.
For me, I think the way you put it that one time when you were like tell it like giving us like your little thesis about like all INFPs, I think it was like your friend's theory that all INFPs are narcissistic because like their feelings, their empathy is based upon literally just putting themselves in the
I
other
was just gonna
person's
say
shoes.
that.
Or like,
Yeah.
yeah, like when they're like, oh, if that happened to me, how would that make me feel?
So-
Oh, I wouldn't like that.
Yeah,
Therefore,
it's like
that's
a
a bad
loaded
thing.
question because
Yeah.
it's like, are we truly feeling what that other person is feeling, or are we viewing it through the lens of like ourselves?
That's what I would say.
Yeah, it's just a difficult question.
I would say you
don't
guys
even
are
know how to answer
projecting
it.
what you are feeling. What it sounds like.
I think to some extent, yeah, because it's I guess that's really the only way to put it. It's definitely a projection of my feelings onto the other person. Because honestly, there's probably been a time where I've seen somebody like really really upset, and then I projected myself on like to them and been like, oh no, I'm really upset because you're really upset, and it's like I know how
Right.
that situation would make me feel, and then they're over it a lot quicker than I am.
Also, like I would add, like, do you know how like there's this trend of like empath people, or they're just like I pick up on other people's emotions. I wouldn't say I'm an empath, but like I would definitely say if someone is like, and I'm not particularly like perceptive when it comes to the like picking up on people's like emotions or whatever, but like if it's obvious and they obviously look like they're unhappy, I will also be unhappy. Like, do you know how dogs like feel whatever emotion that you're feeling? That's kind of like the way that I pick up on emotions. Like I can't like feel like in a good mood if like my friend is not in a good mood. Like I can't have fun. Like okay, this is like very like negative vibes. I can just kind of pick up on it. Like yeah, it kind of transfers over to me.
I have a little tangent just about like people saying that they're empaths. I think that's one of the biggest red flags like ever is when you go around like when people are going around being like I'm an empath, blah 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 blah. It's like typically if you truly are an empath, you're not gonna go around saying you're an empath, and it's just like this front to try to like to make yourself look good. You know what I mean? That's just my little
posting
side
on
business,
social
but-
media that you are an empath is like just
That's an
going to a
empath.
it's like going to a crowded street and holding up a sign that says I'm a good person.
Exactly. That's why I'm like, that's the biggest red flag. Because like people who are good people don't go around telling people, "Oh, I'm such a good person." You know, I feel like they kind of let their actions speak more for it. But sorry
Right.
for that little side tangent.
So just a couple more questions here, and then we'll wrap things up. I wanted to ask this one because this seems like just like a funny generic INFP question. Do you guys feel misunderstood by people?
100%.
Why is
Yeah,
that?
I do.
I'm gonna take a moment to think about that, and I'll answer in a second.
For me, it just comes from like experience because I've explained the way I feel to a lot of people, and then they're just like, "Okay, so this is how you feel." I'm like, "No, that's not how I feel." And then I explain it again, and they're like, "Okay, this is how you feel." And it's like, "No." So it's just like I'll explain something, and they interpret it like, especially like when I'm talking, there's this girl I talk to, and like whenever I like, she always like interprets like the things I do like in the most negative way, and I'm just like, no, that's not what like how I mean it. And then I just feel completely misunderstood because I don't know, she takes like all like my intentions in a negative way, or like I have a like um intent behind like what I'm doing or something, and I just like, I don't know, a lot of times I feel misunderstood. That's like one example, but like I'd say there's a trend like of it throughout my whole life, especially like when I have like a feeling about like when I'm like especially like with my family, because like when I was a kid, I'd be like, my mom would be like, do the dishes, you have to do this and this and this, and I'm like, but I don't want to because it's like boring and it's work and I hate it. And then I tell my like all these reasons. She's just like, well, you think I like doing it? Like, no. And then she gives me a lecture, and I'm just like, but you don't understand. Like, I hate it on a different level than you. Probably just like, you're like, you do the dishes and you're like, like I I wish I wasn't doing this, but like whatever. I'm like, I hate doing this. Like, I have like
Like
an
you don't feel
emotional reaction
congruent
to
to
it.
it,
Like,
yeah. You're like, okay,
yes, like
yeah.
yeah, that's yeah.
Um, I guess like I was thinking about it a little bit. I guess I feel most misunderstood by sensors, because it's like you explain your problems and then like they completely, I feel like, don't understand it because they're just like, well, just stop thinking about it, or it's not that deep, or it's just the way it is. So I guess I feel like most misunderstood by like sensors,
Yeah.
or like more like um uh like
Thinking types.
yeah, thinking types, because they're like,
Right.
Yeah.
especially like INTPs or like INTJ, because it's like they've used like things through such like a logical lens that uh they can't understand like the FI. So it's like, it's just, it can lead to you being misunderstood.
Yeah, I've noticed
Like when you
INTPs and INFPs. Like INTPs are particularly compensating on that. Like they're really just like, I know you feel like this, but the truth is blank. And I try to explain to them, I'm like, that's not how they work. And INTPs just get stuck like that's how they should work. And I see INTJs do that too. So I do think like the INTX types are particularly hard on the INFPs.
I feel like that's why me and Lance kind of can like butt heads at sometimes, because he's so logical and I'm just so like, I feel this way, blah 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 blah. I mean, I don't think me and Lance butt heads like that much anymore, but like it can lead to
Yeah.
like a misunderstanding. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I want to pose this question to you, Kitten, as an outside perspective. Do you
Mm.
think that INFPs are as misunderstood as they think they are?
Um, like I like thinking about like all of the conversations we have. Like I'm sort of believing that you guys are sort of like my opposite, in the sense. Like, and I know that you're not, but it does sound like a lot of the things that you experience and the way you go about things is like very opposite to me. So I want to say, for me personally, I don't have an understanding for some things. I feel like, okay, look, I mean, I don't like sensors, so like maybe sensors don't understand you, but I also think that maybe the self-assessment could probably hinder like your judgment in whether you're being understood or not, right? And how you're like assessing other people. Like, 'cause I think I fall into that trap as well, where it's like you think you're being misunderstood, but also at the same time, it could be just you not clearly like saying what you mean and not, being coherent. So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think like the same way you think sensors are blind to your conclusions is the same way I would say thinkers are blind to like the feeling, like the way feelers feel. Because
Mhm.
because I've also I'm guilty of this because like I'm like sometimes hyper logical like when I'm like like I'm like particularly like unhealthy. I'll do like an example would just be like when someone's like unhappy, like I've been in this position, like they're unhappy and then they're telling me like and then this happened and then you do like and they're like ridiculing me like I'm not doing this, I'm not like or I don't care for them enough and I'm just like but I have and then you give them the facts and then they're like it's kind of like an indication, but like they don't want to say it outright, but it's like a metaphorical in a way where like they don't want to say it like outright, but it's like if you look under the lines, you'll understand. I feel like that's the same thing with like when you tell your problems to thinkers, like this happened and then I feel this way about it, and the thinkers are just like, why don't you do this and then this will solve it, and it's like that's not the issue. Like the issue is like a little bit more, I don't know, comprehensive, and like I feel like sometimes thinkers like try and break things down and then they kind of just like destroy how we feel about things. Like when they like remove the feeling from the situation, it kind of like
Yeah.
it feels like you guys don't understand us.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
mean,
you say you feel like blank. Then we're like, well, here's a list of reasons why you shouldn't feel like blank. And you're like, thanks, I still feel like it.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, even then, like when me trying to like answer that question, I guess like I'm not directly addressing like perhaps like your feeling of misunderstood. Like how I quite literally just said, well, maybe it's not them that's the problem, maybe it's you that's the problem, and you're doing
Yeah,
something wrong. Like I think, yeah, that's probably where the disconnect is then, because I'm like analyzing it like through that lens, and like I can't understand like I guess what this feeling of misunderstood is. Like objectively I can be like, okay, yeah, you have the feeling of feeling misunderstood, but then I'm like, okay, what are you gonna do about it though? And like I
Yeah.
don't care of like I guess how that emotionally makes you feel. I'm just like, then make yourself understood. Like I don't like just
For
yeah,
for me personally, I feel as if my struggle isn't understanding INFPs. It's building a vibe where INFPs are comfortable enough to be open with that understanding. It's more so like getting INFPs to be vulnerable. And that could just be arrogance, and it could be that I don't understand INFPs. I feel as if generally I understand the perspective of INFPs. And INFPs sometimes conflate if you don't agree with it, you don't understand it. And I've talked about this with INFPs where they've been like, well, if you understood, then you would agree. And I would be like, well, I can understand and still think that you're wrong. And then it's not even that like I think that you're wrong for having that emotion or you're wrong for having that value. I just have a disagreement and I can hold that disagreement and still like be just as open to you and just as vulnerable. But with INFP, since they work through this resonation, like, do I feel like this matches to me? And they kind of micromanage that. The struggle is getting INFPs to be open more so than it is understanding them. Because INFPs will say like, no one understands me. But it's like, well, then why are you like you're expecting everybody to read clues? And like to some degree, like yeah, like when you're with somebody that agreeable, you are going to have to read clues. But the INFP should also on their end work to be more open.
yeah. I think it's like a double-sided thing because I don't want to push the narrative that thinkers or like just any type needs to become more like emotionally or intelligent and understand the way INFPs feel and like coddle them and like just make sure they feel loved, because I mean there's like the other side to where INFPs will just sit there like over like thinking something and like never do it, so sometimes it is kind of just better just to go through the process of just like solving the problem, because like sometimes I can
Right.
just fix a problem, so
All right. So this next question, we'll conjoin these two questions to get us out of here. Quickly, Creek, Max, are you guys codependents, and do you guys think the INFPs are generally codependents?
I would say I'm very codependent, and I mean, it's something I think I've definitely worked on. I've come a long way, like from how I was 2 years ago. I feel like I was at my most codependent like 2 years ago. But yeah, I do think INFPs tend to be super codependent, at least in all of the INFPs that I've seen. Yeah, they tend to be codependent.
Yeah,
Pete, do
I
you consider
think.
yourself codependent?
Yeah, I was gonna say like I think. I mean, no, I don't think I would consider myself codependent, even though I think everyone is codependent to a certain level. You know, the whole you guys were talking about how everyone is self-destructive to a certain level. I'd say the same thing for codependency, but I think although INFPs have a gravitation towards being codependent, I think they have the best ability to kind of seize their like codependency because they have like the value for the self and like being self-reliant and valuing our individuality. So I think we have the best route out of codependency, and I think the challenge would be balancing between like being too hyper individualistic and narcissistic and being like too dependent on other people for your own validation. So I think the problem is because I think like you either are super narcissistic like for INFPs and you need to like bring yourself down and start like caring about how others feel, or it's the other way around,
Right.
like vice versa. So I think like reaching the balance is like the difficulty in my opinion.
Right. Okay. And then the second half of that question is, do you guys idealize people?
I would say yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say yeah. I mean like I idealize people like to the extent where like it's harmful because
Yeah.
I'll idealize someone where like to the point where like it's unrealistic, and then when they like step like one misstep, and then I'm like, wow, I can't believe you've done this,
Yeah,
like,
bro,
and
I
then and
totally
it's
feel
like
that.
it's yeah yeah. So
Right.
it's
And
like
I,
I'd say it's like definitely a negative thing.
The good old INFP
I was gonna
RAS flip.
I was gonna halt that question actually because we are gonna do an episode about RAS flips, but we could touch on it. I do see you guys susceptible to these RAS flips, where like you'll see something you don't like and you'll turn cold. And I feel like if you guys just let yourselves calm down for a second, instead of having this RAS flip where you're like, you know what, this person's value is sapped. I don't care about them anymore. Like instead of having that, if you just like watched yourself in that moment and let yourself calm down, you guys might be like, well, no, like I still do care about this person and they still are a good person and maybe I could talk to them and like see their perspective on this and da 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 da. But I think that you guys are susceptible to RAS flips. So, and Shane, you've talked about this too. So I'd like to hear your feedback on this. What is your guys' relationships to RAS flips? And just to like say what they are real quick for the audience, the RAS is reticular activation system. It basically stands for your selective focus. So everybody's always focusing on something, and your RAS is the part of your brain that navigates that. And an RAS flip is basically where you see something you don't like about somebody, and then your whole perspective turns where you start to think about all the things that you dislike about them. And that essentially is an RAS flip. So, Creek, Max, Shane, what is your relationship to that? And do you guys think that you've gotten better with your RAS flips?
I would say personally, yes, I have, because I can kind of pinpoint now when I'm having one. Um, and that like and I feel like I've set up a little more structure in letting myself calm down and letting the emotions cool down. Whereas like when I would have an RAS flip, the first thing I would do like is go like I would go off on the person or I'd get really mad. But now I'm a little more able to take a step back from the situation, assess it a tiny bit more logically, not really that logically, but yeah, I mean, I think I've allowed myself, or I've learned that I need to sometimes withdraw and just give myself the time to calm down and then reassess from there on if like my reaction is like warranted to like whatever somebody did, or whatever the situation might be.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm glad Max was like, because like I mean, I've definitely seen the development and like Max improving his controlling it at least. But for me, I mean, I have like put no effort into it, and it's like mine is really bad because I mean, I just do it with like even with like I mean like even with my degrees, like I change between degrees like a lot, like with just like my indecisiveness when it comes to like I'll just see something and I'm like, whoa, this is really cool, and then my whole focus shifts to that thing, and then I like hyper idealize it, and then I do that with people, and they do one little negative thing, and I'm just like, oh my god, I hate this person, like, and they did this other day, and then they did that, and then I'll like pull up all these negative things from my past, and that's
I've
like the
noticed that
SI,
with
right?
like characters on Yubo that you'll be excited to be in a live with somebody, and then they'll do something you don't like, and like their name will come up, and you'll be like, "Fuck that guy!" Like your entire like thing just sits out because of something you notice that you dislike.
Yeah,
I've definitely heard you do that.
Yeah, yeah.
I just feel like RAS slips can cause a lot of instability with relationships, and I've noticed, especially in the past, the instability like in my relationships, and that's why I've kind of I've had to learn to control it more and realize when it's happening, and just
Yeah.
what to do to stop it. You know.
They're essential because they're going to be inevitable in relationships.
And I don't
Every
think
person in a relationship is going to feel that moment of an RES flip of like, you know what, this person isn't the person I thought it was. I'm done. And like, if you actually want to have a sustaining relationship, you have to admit to yourself, like, these are inevitable. These aren't true. This is just my brain being hyper reactive. And I'm
Yeah.
going to sift through my cortisol spike and see how I actually feel before I decide to act on anything.
Now I have a question for you guys. Do you guys think like, oh no, this is more. I think we should save that for like the
RAS.
RAS.
Yeah. Let's not
Yeah.
delve too much into
I,
RES. I want Creek to finish his thoughts and Shane to comment on RES flips.
Oh, okay. Just to wrap up what I was saying, I was just gonna link it back to because I mean, the way I use it, like, I don't really get it into like, I mean, obviously, like, I and manifest in like relationships that I have, but like it would like manifest like in little things, just like even on like a YouTube comment, like I get a negative reply like on a video I've made, and I'm like, whoa. Like I suck. Like like nothing I do. Like this like I hate this video. Like when someone comments like on it, like nitpicks on like I made a piece of music, and then they're like, well, you know, the hi hats are kind of off, and I'm like, oh my god, I have to delete this. Like this thing sucks, and I don't know. It's like so I just kind of hyper focus on like nitpicky things that people like bring up. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny because after hearing Max talk first, I'm like, oh, yeah, my RAS flips are probably a lot better. And then I heard Creek talk, and I'm like, oh crap, no, they're pretty bad. Because I can definitely relate in the sense of it's definitely different, at least when it comes to like with people. I don't like get angry and stuff, but I question and then hyper focus. So like a good example, since I'm so addicted to TikTok, there's this content creator who's had some shift in some of her philosophical and faith-based views, and that's cool, you know, do what you want. But it was a person I like kind of looked really highly to, and so when that happened, my brain just started going like, definitely questioning like, oh, can I trust this person, should I associate with this person? And then almost every post after has been on hyper focus on every negative aspect of it, and me just being like, okay, I'm gonna disassociate. That's what it really always leads to, is some sense of disassociation. Which, to be honest, is like, it's not a bad RAS flip. It's more just like my brain should just like not really. My mom always says you let people control yourself too much because you hyper focus on other people, and I'm like, no, I don't. But I just said that story, and I'm like, oh crap, I do.
Yeah, and oh, sorry, I thought you were
No, you're
finished.
good. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna shift it to a whole like, why isn't like this taught like in a high school, bro? This is bad.
It
Because,
really should
like no,
be.
because really when you think about it, like I was thinking like when you were talking about like your dislike for that one like character, I just thought about the way like people like dislike political figures or like famous people. It's like imagine all the people that hate Kanye, imagine all the people that hate like any public figure. It's all based upon like a negative perception they have of them. So whenever they do one little bad thing, they're like just imagine us, right? Because like we like Kanye, right? So like if he does a negative thing, we'll be like we'll be like, no, he had good intentions, and we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But if someone who doesn't like him, they seem to do a negative thing, they're like, the typical Kanye, like, you know, he always like, you know, he's a loser, blah. So it's like we're always gonna like, you know, have this confirmation bias where we just have like this predisposition about someone, and whatever like thing they do, even when they do it with, I've just noticed on the music subreddit, whenever like there's a good thing like Kanye's done like donated to a charity or whatever, they'll be like, he's doing this as like a publicity stunt or whatever. So
He's misunderstood.
I think
so yeah, I was just gonna say it's like Go ahead, Shade.
Go ahead. Finish your
I'm,
thought.
no, I'm pretty much done. That was my point. Like the whole what's it called?
Or go
Confirmation
ahead,
bias thing.
Max.
Max was talking.
Oh, I don't have anything to add to that.
I was just gonna say, for me as a religious person, and I don't want to get too deep into
There
that.
we
but-
go.
No. But I say, when it comes to like, for me as a Christian, I find I think a lot of people who dislike Christianity, like whether they just don't wish to subscribe to it or have like an actual anti-theistic hatred for it, a lot of them are based on like a really serious foundations of misconceptions. And I find out that as you look more and more into these people's journeys, I remember one girl had a TikTok up on her Yubo page, and she was like, this is the truth. And it was like, why do I hate Christianity? And it's like, because your religion perpetuates way into politics and into government, and it's the reason women can't do this. And it's the reason, I'm like, all of that has nothing to do with any core principle of it. You've just, since you've taken a struggle with your relationship with it and built misconceptions, now you've just continued this hatred almost, and like every bad thing it does, you will now just hyper focus on to hate. And I'm just
Right.
like, yo, like,
I just think people don't
chill.
understand it because a lot of because INFPs they're gonna feel this, they're gonna hear this and they're like, well, I don't want to drive my RS flip, so how do I rationalize it to myself? And they're gonna be like, well, you just see something you don't like in somebody and that means they're a bad person. It's like that. But like really, okay, if we contextualize it to relationships, they'll say to themselves like, well, like I see that person and they're a bad person. Or they'll notice something that doesn't correlate with them and the other person, and like they'll be like, well, this one thing doesn't correlate, so we're just not meant to be with each other, or like things like that. When really, essentially what's happening is your biology is like, okay, I see something I don't like. I don't want to be here at all now that I see this thing I don't like, because I don't want to have to ever deal with it. So how do I create this map of this person where they're this demonic figure, or they're the exact opposite thing that I thought them to be, so that I can rationalize cutting them out of my life without feeling guilty for like getting rid of somebody and like having to sympathize like with me getting rid of them and like doing other shit. So it's like, okay, well, how do I convince myself that they're a bad person so that I can not have to deal with this thing? It's mental laziness. It's like just like your unconscious is just taking over to move you out of a situation instead of just dealing with the situation. And people don't understand that to be what RES flips are. And sometimes they're not that. Sometimes RES flips are necessary. They're there for a reason. But I feel like specifically in like romantic relationships and friendships, like this is key to be aware of, because if you don't, like if you're not aware of this, you're just going to isolate yourself. And obviously a lot of INFPs do that, so. But yeah, we'll move on to the final question of the podcast. Final question to Creek and Kitten, and then have a question for the non-INFPs, and then we'll go. So, or final question to Creek and Max. My bad. How do you guys feel about the current state of the world?
Wow, that's also a loaded question. I think, unfortunately, and this is just the pessimism coming out of me, I feel like things are just getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and just like it started with COVID, and then it's just like this.
The WWE with the shit.
2017 WWE, man, you don't understand. No, I think there's a lot of beautiful things in the world, and there's a lot of things to be happy and appreciative about, but I think the overall state of the world and just people and society is at the moment on the decline. That's just my opinion. But I mean, I do have some optimism. I don't think it's gonna be like this forever, you know. But
yeah,
that's my view.
Maybe, I mean, it might have to do with the fact that I'm not particularly pessimistic at the moment, but like I'm pretty optimistic about like how the world is right now. Like I think I probably agree with like that old like saying about like there's just way more, like TV now. That's why like we see more like negative things. I probably agree to that sentiment to a certain extent. Obviously like, there's negative things. But I think that's like a natural like product of just like living. I don't think we're ever gonna get rid of suffering. I think we just need to get to a point where Yeah, also, I think to a certain point, it is kind of idealistic to think like that we could like live in a perfect utopia where like we don't have any negatives, right? So I think like even based on the statistics, like less people are like dying, like we have like way more advancements in technology, and I think we're heading generally in a I would say in a positive direction, like in terms of just like providing people with like care and just like even like the whole like political spectrum, how like a lot of people are like emphasizing like being sensitive and like making sure people are like I don't know, that they feel good about themselves. Like even with the when we talk about like, oh, don't fat shame, or like just this whole like sensitivity thing. I mean, obviously it has its negatives, like when people talk about cancel culture and stuff. But I think for the most part, like society's heading in a direction where people are like being more self-aware about how other people might feel about certain like actions that they act out. So I think like like people are becoming more compassionate, even if it is from like a blind, blind, like, because I do think it is from like a perspective people are just being like, oh, this is like what's socially acceptable is to be compassionate, so let's all be compassionate now, even though it's coming from like, in my opinion, a negative. Like I don't think people are doing this like out of like just their own virtue, like, I'm gonna be compassionate. I think it is kind of like a societal thing, like people are pressured into. I do think it is heading in a better direction. Yeah.
Right. So to wrap up, what I want to do is I want me, Kitten, and Shane to talk about from the outside after this podcast and hearing you guys think how we conceive of you guys, and then if you guys have anything to say after that, you could say it, and then we'll wrap it up. I think after hearing this podcast that it's difficult as fuck to be an INFP, and I would never in a million years want to be an INFP. At the same time, there's an underlying sentiment behind all of your traits that may be deemed as unhealthy that says, I don't want to be this way. And that is a honesty that I find specific and rare to INFPs. Whereas other types, they idealize their lows. Like in over here as INTJ, I'm sure she's had moments where like, I don't want to be emotional because I want to know the truth. Like she's probably like
Wait,
idealized herself.
that's my
Like
whole identity, like throughout high school. Like I literally got called a robot, and I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." Don't know what that means, and now I'm like, "Oh shit, that's probably not a good thing."
yeah. Whereas like INFPs are like, I want to reconcile this, and I find that rare to them. So like for me, like I know like romantically I want to end up with an INFP. And I know that INFPs are my favorite types. And I could sit here and talk about all the draining characteristics. But I do think INFPs are redeemed in that I find them to be the most pure personality type, whatever that means. And I think that the ENTP INFP match is underrated. I think if we work on ourselves, we could be the shit. And yeah, I find INFPs to be similar enough to me that I can vibe with them on conversation and generally know where they're coming from, but also different and with a polarity to me enough where I can learn from them. And there's always something new to gain from their perspective. So from the outside, that's how I see you guys. That's how I conceive of you guys. Ian and Shane, what is your perspective on INFPs?
Let me go first because I gotta pee. So I'm gonna say real quick and then run. But I think my relationship with INFPs is definitely this like, I feel like there's more connection I have with them than disconnection to some extent, simply being an ENFP. Like I really do, I love INFPs out of a sense of relatability. I don't know if that's a real word, but in that sense of connection, like uh they're definitely a preferred type for me to interact with. Granted, so are almost all intuitives, but specifically them because I feel like it just, has made life easier. Kitten.
Yeah. And Kitten, how do you conceive
Okay,
of
to the
INFPs?
bathroom. Yeah, I mean, like I agreed with you. Like their life does sound like really, really stressful. I think like as like the most, I don't want to say misinformed, but like ill-informed person in the group, like I definitely have to do more research on like what each of the individual types are. I think there's a lot of things I relate to that have been discussed. But then like I said, I also do think that INFPs sort of seem like my opposite with certain things, and like I just incompatible. But I don't I don't think I hate INFPs at all. Like, if I'm not sure about their agreeableness, but I mean, you guys have been pretty alright. So
Thanks,
Yeah.
honey.
Just pretty
Okay.
all right.
sorry, that's the INTJ. Like, I'm not gonna give you any more than that.
Rather than asking you guys like a broad question about like, well, how do you guys feel? Like reflecting on yourselves this entire time, like during the duration of this podcast, do you guys learn anything new about yourself or have different insights about yourself that you guys would like to share?
Let me give some thought to that. Creek, do you have any?
um. Well, I say my insights would just come from like some of the experiences that like you shed light on. I mean, on how like RAS like flips like affect you. Because I mean they don't really affect me to like in that relationship way. Like it's more so like with like objective things in the world and how I relate with the world. So I think like you kind of shed light in terms of like on like your perspective on how it like
Mm-hmm. I guess my insight would be how, like, I guess I never realized like how like unique the quality of like being able to reflect on yourself. I feel like it's like one of our strongest qualities, but at the same time, man, it fucking like holds us back, and that's like frustrating. But it's also
yeah.
good to have, you know, self-awareness and be able to like reflect um on yourself in an honest way, you know what, and not like rationalizing or like glorifying like some other personality types like tend to do, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand.
We could go ahead and end it there. See you guys on the next episode, and we are out of here.